slowly distracts my head. It's a girl in the middle of the nothingness. And you tell me why to alter the truth, and I stand here to explain it with you. And you disappear in front of my eyes. So what's I remember? I'm analyzed, and the rhythm is a sunshine, my look. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. And I really miss the sunshine, my love. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. Thousands of people and friends, regardless directions ahead. It's only the loneliness I feel, so lonely. I decide to rain. The grains on my head is sad to fade away. To hear your quiet slowly distracts my head. It's a girl in the middle of the nothingness. And you tell me why to alter my truth, and I spend 3 days explaining to you. And you disappear in front of my eyes. So what's I remember? I'm analyzed, and I really miss the sunshine, my look. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. And I really miss the sunshine, my look. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. Tell me why you tell me why to alter the truth.
Alright, let's get started, you guys. How you doing here? I'm gonna swap over to the other camera. And hello! Good morning where you are, good afternoon, good evening, wherever, whatever the time is, where you guys are. Welcome to Weekend Winters. I am Christy Winters, and you are here to spend part of your weekend with me. I don't know, I'm trying out new bits, new slogans, so you guys can tell me what you think. Anyway, from the chat, I want to just say hello. Happy daylight savings time in Germany. We've now changed our clocks for the season. That means we're back on, I'm back on at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So thanks, Mike, for your thanks for me being back on at that ungodly hour on a weekend. But anyway, just checking some of my levels here. It seems to be just fine. A little loud, maybe. Yeah, I'm still settling in to my new setup and kind of doing my feng shui of lights and sound and resources. But yeah, I've actually put together what I hope is a show that you guys will enjoy. I've got some light stuff, got some heavy stuff a little bit later on, and then some PragerU dunking we're meant to get to. But to start the morning, I thought we'd start off geeky, because you guys know how I like to get my geek on. And one of the things that I often find myself coming back to again and again is this particular notion in science, falsification. It's an idea that I think is incredibly important to understand correctly. And I think a lot of people understand science as a process, but there's still a little there's uncertainty as to how a scientific finding is established. And this is a point that I often made in my teaching of research methods courses, because sorry, I just got distracted by the chat. Because in order to do statistical tests, you do have to have a clear idea of what null hypothesis you're testing to see if you can overcome it, and what your criteria are for the alternative hypothesis or hypotheses. So I'm seeing 250s out telling me that even YouTube didn't get the times right. I'm not surprised. It's very complicated to keep track of all the time zones across the world and when they change. But you would think that YouTube, being Google, they would have access to better clocks to do that. Anyway, getting back to the idea of science as falsification. The The reason why I find this idea particularly important is that it was designed by Popper to be a counterweight to the biases that we naturally come to science with. Science might be a neutral process in how we set it up, but the people who do it are not neutral. The people who do it have perspectives and biases and hopes. And I can tell you, I see it very often, I saw it, I should say very often, when I would tell my students, a negative finding is still a finding. If you have a theory that should predict an outcome or explain a phenomenon and you find nothing, well, first of all, make sure you did your study, you did your maths right, you did everything right. And if you're convinced that you've done the process right and the theory surprisingly no longer holds, that's a finding. Yet when my students would run analyses, they would inevitably feel or express disappointment that the theoretical variable of interest they were interested maybe wasn't as significant as they thought it should be, or positive as they thought it should be. You know, maybe it was a negative effect and they thought it should be positive, or there was no effect and they got disappointed. I have to remind them, negative finding, still a finding. So because there were some requests for the continued nerdiness on Weekend Winters, and I don't know how you could get a show from me and not have nerdy, so let's just go with this. I wanted to dig out this particular website that I often cited. If you can't read all of Conjectures and Refutations, this bit is quite important. So I'm going to probably be reading a little bit at length, but I think it's definitely fair use. So let's get into the story behind this. Karl Popper is a 20th century philosopher, and one of his areas, he was part of the Vienna Circle. He was a really rigorous thinker. He was working in the earlier part of the 20th century. And at that time, you know, we tend to think of science as a fixed, ready-made, completed thing that's just been done and dusted forever. But it's an evolving process. So Karl Popper in the early 1920s, 30s and 40s, actually this is from 1963, but he was working at a time when people were thinking very deliberately about science and how it functions, what makes a meaningful statement or a non. There's a lot of philosophy going on. So Karl Popper was asked to give a talk, and I guess in a course or whatever, but he decides to address the problem he started to grapple with. When should a theory be ranked as scientific? So I'll just read this a little bit. I won't go over the whole document. I won't read it all out, but I will pick up little bits that I remember as being quite important. Right. So this is from, again, Karl Popper. It's an excerpt from Conjectures and Refutations, which was published in 1963. When I received the list of participants in this course and realized that I had been asked to speak to philosophical colleagues, I thought, after some hesitation and consolation, that you would probably prefer me to speak about those problems which interest me most and about those developments with which I am most intimately acquainted. I therefore decided to do what I have never done before, to give you a report on my own work in the philosophy of science since the autumn of 1919, when I first began to grapple with the problem, when should a theory be ranked as scientific? Or is there a criterion for the scientific character or status of a theory? The problem which troubled me at the time was neither when is a theory true, nor when is a theory acceptable. My problem was different. I wished to distinguish between science and pseudoscience, knowing very well that science often errs, and that pseudoscience may happen to stumble on the truth. Pause, time out here. This is what's really important about Popper's thinking. He's not saying science is some sort of special, rarefied process that if you just adhere to it will always produce truth. Nor is he saying that pseudoscience can never be right. He's asking how to distinguish between a scientific process and a pseudoscience, a pseudoscientific claim. Understanding that there isn't a particular safe way to guarantee that the process itself will give you truth. Continuing on. I knew, of course, that the most widely accepted answer to my problem, that science is distinguished from pseudoscience or from metaphysics by its empirical method, which is essentially inductive, or that is to say, proceeding from observation or experiment. But this did not satisfy me. On the contrary, I often formulated my problem as one distinguishing between a genuinely empirical method and a non-empirical or even pseudo-empirical method. That is to say, a method which, although it appeals to observation and experiment, nevertheless does not come up to scientific standards. The latter method may be exemplified by astrology, with its stupendous masses of empirical evidence based on observation, on horoscopes, and on biographies. And you see where he's coming to, where he's coming from here. He's saying that pseudoscience itself, too, can claim to be empirical, it can claim to be inductive, it can claim observation. So how do you distinguish between two processes that claim to use the same methods? How can one be scientific distinguished as, and the other not? So I guess I am going to read most of this because it's pretty short, and Popper's incredibly clear and precise and right to the point. So I'm just going to, I said I wasn't going to read it all, I probably am. So continuing on, right? But as it was not the example of astrology which led me to my problem, I should perhaps briefly describe the atmosphere in which my problem arose and the examples by which it was stimulated. After the collapse of the Austrian Empire, there had been a revolution in Austria. The air was full of revolutionary slogans and ideas, often new and often wild theories. Among the theories which interested me were Einstein's theory of relativity was no doubt the far most important. The other three were Marx's theory of history, Freud's psychoanalysis, and Alfred Adler's so-called individual psychology. There was a lot of popular nonsense talked about these theories, and especially about relativity, as still happens even today. That's still true in the 21st century, I think, in science fiction sometimes. But I was fortunate in those who introduced me to the study of this theory. We all, the small circle of students to which I belong, were thrilled with the results of Eddington's eclipse observations, which in 1919 brought the first important confirmation of Einstein's theory of gravitation. It was a great experience for us, and one which had a lasting effect on my intellectual development. So to come out of the text again, the Eddington experiment was an attempt to test, well, they were doing, I think, they were doing an expedition off to Antarctica or some part of the world, and they decided they were going to take a picture of a star that was next to the sun before and after a gravitational event. And so they set up their cameras and they took one picture of the star before there was a, gravitational event. That doesn't make any sense. An eclipse. It was an eclipse event from the sun. And so they took a picture of the star before the eclipse. And, well, I guess it is a gravitational event because the assumption was the gravity of the eclipse would sort of bend the light. The light itself would be affected as it came from the star, past the gravitational pull of the eclipse, and yada, yada, yada. So they took a second picture, and what they observed was that, indeed, a picture taken in the exact same spot, one before and one after, there was a difference in where the light appeared. That didn't mean the star moved. The test of it was that the light would move because of the force of gravity pulling it out of its original position. And one thing that kind of they didn't take into account was atmospheric shifting. So if you want to critique the experiment, one might say, yeah, you can claim that it was the gravitational pull during this eclipse that you could see the star light showing up in a different spot, but maybe, you know, it was just the shifting atmosphere of Earth's temperature, you know, the way that things shimmer in the sky because of our atmosphere not being, stable. It's a moving thing. But at any rate, at that time, they went, hey, look, if Einstein were wrong about this, we would see the star light in the same place. But as we see it in a different place, this would be evidence in favor of the idea that the light was being bent, being pulled by the force of gravity. So that's a little bit about the Eddington experiment, which in 1960, I guess, whenever he gave this talk, he didn't need to explain as much, but I did. All right. Yes. The other three theories I have mentioned were also widely discussed among students at the time. I myself happened to come into personal contact with Alfred Adler and to even cooperate with him in his social work among the children and young people in the working class districts of Vienna, where he had established social guidance clinics. It was the summer of 1919 that I began to feel more and more dissatisfied with these three theories: the Marxist theory of history, psychoanalysis, and individual psychology. I began to feel dubious about their claims to scientific status. My problem perhaps first took the simple form: what is wrong with Marxism, psychoanalysis, and individual psychology? Why are they so different from physical theories, from Newton's theory, and especially from the theory of relativity? To make this contrast clearer, I should explain that a few of us at the time would have said we believed in the truth of Einstein's theory of gravitation. This shows that it was not my doubting the truth of those other three theories which bothered me, but something else. Yet neither was it that I nearly felt the mathematical physics to be more exact than sociological or psychology types of theories. Thus, what worried me was neither the problem of truth, at that stage at least, nor the problem of exactness or measurability. Do you see what he's saying here? So what he's saying, again, I'm going to stop this. It's not that he was doubting that Marx wasn't making legitimate critiques and observing things accurately, nor was it the problem of, the mathematical physics, that because we can't measure, working class as precisely as we can weigh atomic particles, that somehow sociology is deficient. Popper is saying those aren't the things that were concerning me in terms of distinguishing between Newton's theory and Einstein's physical theories, and Marx, Adler, and Freud's more sociological or individual psychology. That's not what was on his mind. It was rather that I felt that these three other theories, posing as science, had in fact more in common with primitive myths than with science, that they resembled astrology more than astronomy. I found that those of my friends who were admirers of Marx and Freud and Adler were impressed by a number of points common to these theories, and especially by their apparent explanatory power. These theories appeared to be able to explain practically everything that happened within the fields to which they referred. The study of any of them seemed to have the effect of an intellectual conversation or revelation. Open your eyes to a new truth hidden from those not yet initiated. Once your eyes were thus opened, you saw confirmation instances everywhere. The world was full of verifications of the theory. Whatever happened always confirmed it. Thus its truth appeared manifest, and unbelievers were clearly people who did not want to see the manifest truth, who refused to see it, either because it was against their class interest or because of their repressions, which were still unanalyzed and crying aloud for treatment. I want you to pay attention to this because I think this is a good summation of why you shouldn't trust faith healers or anyone else who gives you a theory that is always being confirmed. They can always interpret events, like the end of the world, right? People who, Baker and all those who believe in an apocalypse. They've been taking current events for the last, in terms of their lifetime, for decades. And when it was the Soviet Union, Russia was going to have the rise of the Antichrist. And then during the Iraq War, it was going to come out of the Middle East. The Antichrist was going to come out of the Middle East. Now they're probably teaching the Antichrist is coming out of the Democratic Party. But whatever happens, they just reshape their pre-existing narrative to explain whatever current events are. And this is the kind of stuff, this always finding confirmation of your theory, no matter where you look, is what started to make Popper feel uncomfortable. Getting back to this. The most characteristic element in this situation seemed to me the incessant stream of confirmations, of observations which verified the theories in question, and this point was constantly emphasized by their adherents. A Marxist could not open a newspaper without finding on every page confirming evidence of his interpretation of history, not only in the news, but also in its presentation, which theories were constantly verified by their clinical observations. As for Adler, oh, sorry, I missed a page here. It's a little bit, I have to read a lot into bright light, so sorry. But its presentation, which revealed, but also in its presentation, which revealed the class bias of the paper, and especially, of course, what the paper did not say. The Freudian analyst emphasized that their theories were constantly verified by their clinical observations. As for Adler, I was much impressed by a personal experience. Once in 1919, I reported to him a case which to me did not seem particularly Adlerian, but which he found no difficulty in analyzing in terms of his theory of inferiority feelings. Although he had not even seen the child. Slightly shocked, I asked him how he could be so sure. Quote, "Because of my thousand-fold experience," he replied, whereupon I could not help saying, "And with this new case, I suppose, your experience has become 1,001-fold?" What I had in mind was that his previous observations may not have been much sounder than this new one, and that each in turn had been interpreted in the light of previous experience, and at the same time counted as additional confirmation. What, I asked myself, did it confirm? No more than a case could be interpreted in the light of a theory. But this meant very little. So I think you should really consider, too, in modern life, how people just take a worldview and they're so quick to just explain events in terms of that worldview based on what had gone before. And as a consequence, they're actually creating the confirmation. They're not finding it. Back to Popper. I reflected, since every conceivable case could be interpreted in the light of Adler's theory, or equally of Freud's. I may illustrate this by two very different examples of human behavior. That of a man who pushes a child into the water with the intentions of drowning it, and that of a man who sacrifices his life in an attempt to save the child. Each of these two cases can be explained with equal ease in Freudian and Adlerian terms. According to Freud, the first man suffered from repression, say of some component of his edible complex, while the second man had achieved sublimation. According to Adler, the first man suffering from feelings of inferiority, producing perhaps the need to prove to himself that he dared to commit some crime, and so did the second man, whose need to prove himself that he dared to rescue the child. I could not think of any human behavior which could not be interpreted in terms of either theory. It was precisely this fact that they always fitted, that they were always confirmed, in which the eyes of their admirers constituted the strongest argument in favor of these theories. It began to dawn on me that this apparent strength was, in fact, their weakness. This is where Popper is just freaking brilliant. He's realizing that the fact that you're just generating more confirmatory evidence every time you see something and interpret it in the light of your theory, you've never found a case that can't be explained with your theory. That doesn't show how powerful your theory is. It actually shows that your theory explains nothing, because you're not actually distinguishing any kinds of events. You're just spinning a story. There's no knowledge gained going forward. So compare this. I hope you guys are enjoying my Popper reading, because I am. I'm going to take a little coffee break here. All right. Yeah, I see someone in geek in the chat. And you're saying, I see a lot of the world through an anti-capitalism lens. And yes, and you want to end capitalism. I think that, we all come to the world with a worldview, but what Popper for me does is to say, okay, how can I test this according to a higher standard, so it's not just confirmation bias. So how do I overcome that confirmation bias to say something above that? How do I source my information in relevant studies or understanding some sort of data that demonstrates my worldview is independent. I'm not just imposing it on the world. So I get that, how we all have our biases, and that's where falsification comes in to help us. All right, so continuing back on with Popper. With Einstein's theory, the situation was strikingly different. Take one typical instance, Einstein's prediction, just then confirmed by the finding of Eddington's expedition. Einstein's gravitational theory had led to the result that light must be attracted by heavy bodies, such as the sun, precisely as material bodies were attracted. As a consequence, it could be calculated that light from a distant fixed star, whose position was close to the sun, would reach the Earth from such a direction that the star would seem to be slightly shifted away from the sun. Or in other words, that stars close to the sun would look as if they had moved a little away from the sun and one another. This is a thing which cannot normally be observed, since stars are rendered invisible in daytime by the sun's overwhelming brightness, but during an eclipse, it is possible to take photographs of them. If the same constellation is photographed at night, one can measure the distance on the two photographs and check the predicted effect. Now, the impressive thing about this case is the risk involved in a prediction of this kind. If observation shows that the predicted effect is definitely absent, then the theory is refuted, or simply refuted. The theory is incompatible with a certain possible result of observations. Or I should say that more correct. I'll just say this correctly. The theory is comparable. Sorry, my eyes are getting tired of reading now. The theory is incompatible with certain possible results of observations. Whew, that was tough. In fact, with results in which everybody before Einstein would have expected. This is quite different from the situation I have previously described, when it turned out that the theories in questions were compatible with the most divergent human behavior, so that it was practically impossible to describe any human behavior that might not be claimed to be a verification of these theories. Now, these, I'm going to break out of Popper again to say that the consideration that he lists here are pretty much the basis of current falsification philosophy, how we apply it, although he goes a little too far. Like, this is an initial articulation of the idea, and there are bits of it that we don't adhere to. I'll point those out when it comes to practicing science today. These considerations led me in the winter of 1919 to 1920 to conclusions which I may now reformulate as follows. 1. It is easy to obtain confirmations or verifications for nearly every theory if we look for confirmations. 2. Confirmations should only count if they are the results of risky predictions. That is to say, if, unenlightened by the theory in question, we should have expected an event which was incompatible with the theory, an event which would have refuted the theory. So there has to be a possibility of your theory being wrong, and you have to understand what it would look like if your theory were wrong. If you assume your theory is correct, then everything you see in the world, you will find a way to interpret it. But if you understand when your theory would have an effect and when it wouldn't, and to be able to make a risky prediction, then you're starting to get into this area of holding your confirmation biases in check a bit more through falsification. Number 3, every good scientific theory is a prohibition. It forbids certain things to happen. The more a theory forbids, the better it is. Now, this was not one where we don't adopt this sort of whole cloth in science now. What he's saying is that you should be really clear as to what won't happen, and so if you're more precise in your predictions, this is how we say it now. We don't say it like the more theory forbids, the better it is. I would say the clearer, more precise a theory is. The more narrow in scope it is, the riskier it is. And so if your prediction, if you say there's a 50-50 chance, it's less impressive than if you say there's a 0.05% chance, and this is my theory, I'm staking my claim on this little bit that it's going to be, right? So that's the notion behind there. You can't explain everything, you have to know where your lines are. 4, a theory which is not refutable by any conceivable event is non-scientific. Irrefutability is not a virtue of a theory, as people often think, but a vice. Here's an example. I often tell my students we import in political science an idea called rational choice theory. And when you take classic rational choice theory, the idea that people try to maximize their utility of whatever, the benefit they get from something, which is, the utility is considered the benefit minus the costs. So whatever cost you put in, and then you experience this benefit, whatever that difference is, that's the utility you've gained. Not just the benefit, but sort of, it might get less if there are higher costs and fewer benefits, and your utility would be lower than if you had very little cost and a lot of benefits, and your utility will be very high. And the assumption is that humans, being rational, will always want to maximize their utility. So when we take rational choice theory and we apply it to vote choice, we find that it's not a good theory. It's if you say people will act in a way that maximize their utility, and the way that that's operationalized in political science is to say the candidate you want to win wins. That's the best utility. If you look at the costs of voting versus the chance that your vote will cause your candidate to win, the utility is very, very small. So from a rational choice perspective, it's not rational to vote. All the time and effort you pour into understanding the candidates and their positions and getting yourself registered into the polls, or organizing your absentee ballot and sending it in, your vote will most likely make no difference whatsoever in the ultimate outcome. So it's not rational to vote. So if it's not rational to vote, that doesn't, we can now say, all right, that theory doesn't work here. If people don't vote to maximize their utility in terms of election outcomes, then what else does? And that's why it's fine for theories to be able to be shown to be wrong, because it's good to know what doesn't explain an event. So when he's saying here, a theory which is not refutable by any conceivable event is non-scientific, I think that's a really seriously good point. You have to know what your null hypothesis is, or your no effect. Otherwise, it's pseudoscience. Every genuine test of a theory is an attempt to falsify it or refute it. Testability is falsifiability, but there are degrees of testability. Some theories are more testable, more exposed to refutation than others. They take as it were, greater risks. Now, the way that we've interpreted this in the practice of science is to say that our default assumption when we run a statistical test is to assume no effect. So we say, every genuine test of a theory is an attempt to falsify it or refute it. The way that, again, I'm going to repeat this, we assume whatever theory we want to test in our data, so I'm talking about political science. Let's say we want to test rational choice theory. Actually, let's do one that would work. So what was the point again? Right, yeah. Let's take party identification. Now, all of the data forever tells us that people will vote for the party they identify with. But every time we run a test of the data, it's another opportunity. Every time we use the data, every time we apply statistical methods to it, it's another opportunity to test the theory. This is why gravity's never been proven. It just withstands falsification for freaking ever. Like, it's never been overcome that we've known of. It might exist in some quantum level, who knows. But anyway, so we would formulate, the assumption is that party identification has no effect on how someone would vote. That's our starting assumption. That's our null hypothesis. So if we were testing that party identification thesis in another data set, we would say the null hypothesis of no effect. Our alternative hypothesis is that partisan identification will be statistically significant and the most important coefficient when explaining vote choice. Right? So maybe we have two. One, it's going to be statistically significant. Right? So this would be a two-part hypothesis. So that means that our measure of party identification has, according to the regression analysis, a demonstrable impact on the outcome. And two, we're going to put an even more restrictive idea that it will be the most important coefficient. It'll be the one that offers the most explanation to vote choice. So then we would run our analyses, and we look at our model and whatever we decided to control for, whatever else, and we would go back and say, all right, well, our hypothesis on party identification was partially, let's say, completely refuted, so we had to accept the alternative. You had to accept that it was both statistically significant and it was the biggest coefficient in the model. It did the most job explaining outcomes, vote choice outcomes in our data set. Or maybe it's only partially upheld. Maybe it was statistically significant, but it was tied for maybe economic concerns or some other theoretical measure. So our theory about the importance of party identification was only partially supported. Or maybe it could have the option that it was we can reject the alternative hypothesis because there was no effect. And if there was no effect, then it can't be the biggest one anyway. So then we would accept the null hypothesis because our observation of no effect would be valid. And we would reject the idea of the alternative hypothesis. And by thinking through things in this way, it forces us as, I think, scientists or social scientists especially, to try to understand where our theory is operating, to understand deeply ourselves. And I often find when I do peer reviews, I can tell I've had more philosophy of science because I know how to properly phrase an alternative hypothesis. And I too often see colleagues who just basically write out what they think is going to happen, but they don't write it out in a way that's falsifiable. And falsifiability is part of the scientific method. Right, so coming down here, confirming evidence should not be counted except when it is a result of a genuine test of the theory, Popper writes. And this means it can be presented as a serious but unsuccessful attempt to falsify the theory. I now speak of such cases as corroborating evidence. What we do now in science is we use statistical tests as a baseline, at least, you know, when it comes to quantitative data, in saying, you know, things have to be of a certain statistical significance, or they have to be, we have to predict a positive or a negative coefficient effect. Does it make it go up or down, more or less? We can also predict a model, like how well a model will try to explain a phenomenon. Will explain more than 75% of the variation. So when it comes to confirming evidence, at this point we've transformed that into finding evidence to confirm it, into setting standards by which scientifically as a community we overcome the null hypothesis. And can then, because, we reject the null hypothesis, we have to accept our alternative hypothesis. And finally, 7, some genuinely testable theories, when found to be false, are still upheld by their admirers, for example, introducing ad hoc or some auxiliary assumptions, or by reinterpreting the theory ad hoc in such a way that it escapes refutation. Such a procedure is always possible, but it rescues the theory from refutation only at the price of destroying, or at least lowering its scientific status. I later described such a rescuing operation as the conventionalist twist or the conventionalist stratagem. So here we don't think that if a theory is if a theory is tested and found to not explain a phenomenon, we don't just chuck it out. We note this because we're not, again, this is early on in Popper's ideas. Theories work in some situations, not others. Some theories will be, have theoretical variables that are important if there aren't, like other theoretical variables that are more powerful. So it's not just if, one time rational choice theory didn't work, we just chuck out all of rational choice theory. So that's that hardline idea that you can't amend a theory, you can't adjust it to take account into new information. That's not how we operate anymore. So I'm going to wrap this up because holy cow, this went way longer than I wanted it to, but I got the basic ideas across here. Let me see if I can go. I'm just going to do the last line and then we're going to finish because I've probably been going for, like a half an hour. I didn't mean to do a half hour on Popper, you guys, but it's been fun for me. All right, so the last paragraph he writes here. Thus the problem which I tried to solve by proposing the criterion of falsifiability was neither a problem of meaningfulness or significance, nor a problem of truth or acceptability. It was the problem of drawing a line, as well as this can be done, between the statements or system of statements of the empirical sciences and all other statements, whether they are of a religious or of a metaphysical character or simply pseudoscientific. Years later, it must have been in 1928 or 1929, I called this first problem of mine the problem of demarcation. That is the problem of demarking science from pseudoscience. The criterion of falsifiability is a solution to the problem of demarcation, for it says that statements or systems of statements, in order to be ranked as scientific, must be capable of conflicting with possible or conceivable observations. So, thus endeth the lesson. That's your big lesson on Popper for the day. But it is, I think, I did emphasize this a lot, and I still value this because it is the way if if you start to yourself think about things in terms of the null hypothesis in your life, look for data, look for studies, base your opinions on things in the world, and kind of check when you're putting in your opinion on stuff versus when things could be testable. And also it, I think, allows you a level of rigor when dealing with other people. So that I've been saying a lot. Hello, Cognitive Society. See so many people in the chat. Twisted Hippies there. Some Random Geek. I see Mithril, No Race. Oh my, that's unusual. Hello, everyone. Okay. So, do I think this means Marxism isn't useful? No. So I have been on record many times saying I think there's a difference. So I don't think only scientifically demonstrable claims are useful, because there are many things that we benefit from considering through a conceptual framework, even if that framework itself isn't quantifiable in specific ways. For instance, Freud's idea of an id, an ego, and a superego. I think that those are really, it's a theoretical framework that allows us to look at certain types of behaviors and understand them in a way that we wouldn't maybe otherwise have. Now, if we look at that from a Freudian perspective, does that mean that is truth and the only explanation of that observed behavior or those statements? Absolutely not. Someone else could come in with another perspective later on. However, in terms of helping us think about things, it is an interesting and I think valuable theory. So when it comes to Marx, it's not that Marx couldn't be made to be scientific. You could actually do measurements of like worker hours and working conditions and alienation from people's labor. You could survey workers and you could create a metric called alienation from your labor. Right? And using Marx's theory, you could operationalize what alienation forms, how we could observe it, or by asking people what sorts of things they would say. So what would you expect to find from people who don't have alienation from their labor? So you want to find other people maybe who work in certain industries where they don't have that, industrial, like revolutionary, industrial revolution approach of piecemeal work, factory work, where you just, do one thing at a time. You could rate satisfaction. You could do a whole bunch of empirical observations based off of Marx's theory, but do it in a way that could be falsifiable. You'd have to specifically think about doing it in that way, though, through interviews, through economic data, and other stuff. So I don't think that simply because a theoretical framework can't be turned into something falsifiable, that it is useless. I also think that because, for instance, like an id, ego, superego theory can't be quantified, then we can't use it as equivalent to a scientific explanation that can be falsified. You see what I mean? Like it starts to operate in this is an interesting idea, but it's an idea that we use to work with. It's not truth, capital T. All right. Well, guys, I actually, I want to go and warm up my coffee. I know we've only been going for 40 minutes, but I'm worried that if I start another topic that we're going to already, go for an hour and a half. So, how about this? I don't know if this is going to be a Weekend Wonders thing. We're going to take a 5-minute break now, then maybe do another 40 minutes, and then I'll wrap it up with the rest. What I'm planning on talking about is a little bit lighter. Maybe I should have started with this, but I want to talk a bit more about RuPaul's Drag Race. Yes, you're going to be dragged down into the geek with me, and we're going to take a look at that, but let's call it 5 minutes. I'm going to go warm up my coffee, take a break, and you guys can relax and enjoy yourselves as well. Also, check out the new music. I'm going to try to change up the song every week, so it's not always that either chill out stuff or the overwhelming orchestra, or now it's going to be more of a guitar dude. But yeah, let's call it 12:46, and I will see you guys back here then. So let me just get this all set up, and then I can transition. Catch you in 5 minutes, guys.
Thousands of people, friends, inside my head is sad to fade away. To hear you quiet slowly distracts my head. It's a girl in the middle of the nothingness. And you tell me why to alter the truth. And I stand to explain it with you. And you disappear in front of my eyes. So that's why I remember I'm analyzed. And I really meant to sunshine, my look. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh, yeah. And I really miss the sunshine, my love. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh, yeah. Thousands of people and friends, regardless directions ahead. It's only the loneliness I feel, so lonely. I decide to rain. The grains on my head is sad to fade away. To hear you quiet slowly distracts my head. It's a girl in the middle of the nothingness. And you tell me why to alter my truth. And I spend 3 days explaining to you. And you disappear in front of my eyes. So that's why I remember I'm analyzed. And I really miss the sunshine, my love. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh, yeah. And I really miss the sunshine, my love. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh, yeah. Tell me why and you tell me why to alter the truth. And I spend 3 days explaining with you. And you disappear in front of my eyes. So that's why I remember I'm analyzed. And you tell me why to alter the truth. And I spend 3 days explaining with you. And you disappear. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. And I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh, yeah. And I really miss the sunshine,
Well, hello guys, I'm gonna do this cool thing where I try to fade out the standard music and bring up my stuff and then also do my screen so you can see me. Hello, there you are. Here I am. Hope you had a good break. It's amazing how quickly 5 minutes flies by when you're on a show. Like 5 minutes can seem to take forever. But if you only have 5 minutes to like run around, make coffee, check stuff, make sure it's all going well, then it's a little bit harder. Anyway, we need to drink this while it's warm. I love coffee. I love coffee. So welcome back to Weekend Winters. We have just got our science geek on for way longer than I'd planned. I am definitely going to have to do a better job of controlling time management on this show so I get through all my content. But anyway, as promised, before we went on our break, I wanted to talk a little bit about my take on RuPaul's Drag Race because I'm just coming to this so crazy late. I know that it's already like 10 seasons in. I don't even know if it's going to be continued anymore. But coming to this a bit late, I wanted to reflect on it sociologically. I wanted to also encourage people to watch it if you haven't. So this, I guess, is a little bit too, like trying out this show is very much a window into drag culture. it came up a bit during my hangout with Kevin. And he was, I think he had, I don't know if he was serious or not, but sort of like raised an eyebrow in his voice at the idea that that there was a drag queen culture. But here's my pitch for why you should watch RuPaul's Drag Race. We are so very fortunate to live in a time where we have access to media like Netflix, like these sort of reality shows. Now, some of it I'm going to say, season 11 is currently airing. Yay! Gonna have to find a way to watch it. So there's a lot of trash on TV. I get that. I get that there's a lot of easy to make reality show content. And you might enjoy it. I mean, not everything that we enjoy has to have an angle or be super smart or whatever. But from watching RuPaul's Drag Race, what I can tell you is that it's not just a typical competition show. It's different from, and I haven't seen Survivor. It's not really my cup of tea, but I do watch Strictly Come Dancing. Not Dancing with the Stars, because it's not, I don't watch American stuff. My influence comes from the original show in Britain, Strictly Come Dancing. And even in those shows, they have, the competition. They give you a little of the behind the scenes. You get to know the participants. And they have different challenges every week. And on the face of it, RuPaul's Drag Race would be the same, insofar that it's a format, it's a competition format, and that people are eliminated and there are various challenges. But it operates in such a different world from anything I'd ever experienced. Like, again, farm girl. I didn't grow up on a farm, but I grew up near farms. Like, I was surrounded by farm fields. And even living in a city the size of Madison, I don't know how big the drag community was, but it was certainly not a part of my cultural life, if there was stuff going on. And the same with, wherever I've lived, I've never really been in tune with the drag scene. So in RuPaul's Drag Race, I get to visit a culture that is completely foreign to me. And also it's all backstage too. So you see the girls getting ready, and one of the things that I noticed right away was how loose pronouns are. He, girl, she, her, whatever, are interchangeable. Absolutely sort of seemingly interchangeable. Then there's also the element of seeing men. So they don't have like a list of, you have to say if you're straight or bi or gay. But definitely I get the impression, based on people's comments and what they express as their preferences, overwhelmingly gay, or at least, like gay plus bisexual. I'm going to assume most of the contestants, like my default now is not to assume a contestant is straight. Like, you see somebody in life and there's heteronormativity, you kind of like default. This is the thing we're trying to challenge, right? You assume that they're heterosexual. And in RuPaul's Drag Race, it's the opposite. I assume you're gay or bi, and then you go from there. But hearing the perspective and the lived experiences, what I've noticed from RuPaul's Drag Race is, one, it's an insight into the culture of the drag scene. It's so complicated, and it's got a really long history. So as I was saying to Kevin, there's a classic sort of drag queen tradition of entertainment and telling bawdy jokes and being very quick-witted, sort of the divine character, if you think about it. Then there's like the pageant scene, where the girls do beauty pageants. There's a runway scene. There's a club scene. And there's, so many different elements. There's ways people do drag in New York that's very different from how they do it like on the West Coast or in the South. People's culture of drag is also very much influenced by whether or not they're in a place where drag is accepted or drag is highly marginalized. And the kind of acceptance they feel or not depends on the kinds of communities that they enter in or form in the drag community. So there is a whole culture in terms of how drag operates in different areas and also across the country. There's an interesting generational divide, which I didn't quite understand at first, but then the more I thought about it, it becomes kind of obvious, and they kind of make allusions to this too, that older drag queens, let's say anyone over the age of 40 who shows up, they know how to sew. They come with sewing skills. And yet the millennial queens, the 19-year-olds, the 22-year-olds, have no clue how to sew. And this you can see is a structure of the cultures that the first generation experienced and then the effect they had. So let's call them like the older generation drag queens. They couldn't go to a store and just get a dress that fit you. You had to make, and the form-fitting, have you seen these form-fitting dresses? I mean, let's take a look. Here's a picture. You want to get something that tight, you know? You want to get something that's that narrow and form-fitting. You have to be able to sew. So a lot of the older queens made their own costumes. They produced everything they wore. So that is a different tradition. The younger queens, as drag became more popularized and mainstreamed, and became something where you could sell shoes and sell dresses and sell accessories, this reduced the need for people to create their own costumes. They could go and start to buy things that fit them, or, you know, have them tailored or whatever else. So you definitely see an interesting generational shift, that younger queens who just have access to more consumerism, they've lost the skill set that sort of drove the first generation that created it. The other thing that, and I realized this more recently, I made the connection. One of the challenges they always do is drag on a dime. And a lot of queens would talk about how they are so good at making things, you know, people would scavenge clothes off the street, or they would go and find really cheap accessories and use them, you know, for like $1 or less. Some guy said, if I spend $5 on my look or my dress and I make $100 in a night, that's a good dress. And where does that drive come from? I was very saddened to realize that a lot of that ability to work without many resources is a direct result of the fact that these boys and men were rejected by their families, or they ran away from their homes, their communities, because they were shunned or rejected or thrown out, and therefore they end up on the streets and they have no money. You know, or they're working in very marginal industries or whatever else. You know, they didn't go to college because of trauma in their life. That to me, this shows sort of the history of oppression and marginalization, and the way that in the drag community, you know, it's what you do with your look and how you carry your look, not how much you spent on it. You don't see a lot of people talking about how much their clothes cost so much as what they're able to do with their looks. And understanding that a lot of drag aesthetic creativity and invention is unfortunately a direct result of horrible poverty and marginalization. It gave me a real different perspective on the kinds of obstacles people overcome in order to be true to themselves. So all of this by saying, you know, there's a lot of fun on RuPaul's Drag Race. There's a lot of corniness. There's a lot of puns. There is a lot of cattiness, and there is a lot of good-looking, very scantily clad men. The pit crew walk around in underwear, basically, and I'm, you know, not so much going to, you know, complain about that. But there is also within it a real insight. I think you have an opportunity to see real people and their lives, the way that being true to themselves has sometimes cost them, and also how you create family when you have found your true self. So I know you might not think all that from RuPaul's Drag Race, but if you watch the discussions, I think in the last season, one of the contestants came out that his first sexual experience was being gang raped, and that his drag was him trying to put positivity in the world. And this is another element too, is the psychology of drag, because being themselves was often a sort of being who they were was attracting is sometimes a magnet for criticism and judgment. and bullying, all the kind of toxic notions of masculinity that are confronted by drag and undermined by drag are considered a threat, right? And so what the reaction of reactionaries is to try to shame it out of you, is to try to make it look pathological. And so in their boy bodies or in their man bodies, they had all this shame. And when they went into drag, they were able to not only transform themselves, but transcend that those negative feelings. A lot of the guys who are doing drag talk about feeling glamorous and feeling sexy and powerful and working it. And there's a lot of them talk about how drag in some ways is therapy. It allows you to inhabit a person who has the confidence you don't. And through working through that experience of confidence in drag, you can sometimes bring it into your non-drag life. So that's it's really powerful. I think if you give it some time and you're open to it and you don't mind the cattiness, there's not so much cattiness, but there's so much life in there and so much that you would never otherwise understand or see or experience because you don't live anywhere where there's a drag community, or you're not friends with a drag queen, or that, you know, drag shows aren't things that you can have easy access to. And that's why I've really been appreciating the show and binging it. It's and also there's the creativity and the artistry. I've just, like I said, I don't want to say that there aren't things to critique about drag. I know there have been some feminist critiques about the way that it sort of makes, there's hyper femininity in it, but watching it, I also see that it's not only the goal of a drag queen to look like a cis woman. There are a lot of expressions, especially with the newer generation, playing around with androgynous looks and coming out without padding on the top, just sort of like a mix of boy-girl androgynous looks. So yeah, I try it out. Give it. So I started. I with shows a lot of times I don't want to start with the first season because usually it's the roughest. Things get better over time. I jumped in at season 6 on the Netflix series, but I would just say give it a season, give it a try, see who you root for, see what you think, and if it's not your cup of tea, that's fine. But at least you tried a season, and maybe you'll see some of the things that I've talked about here in the season that you watch. So I'm gonna go into the chat a little bit here because I haven't done that yet. I talked a little bit about the chatty chat people, but not too much. Hold on. All right, that's me being very polite. All right, so looking at, I see La Heretic is in the house, Stephanie's in the house, HK, mwah, how you doing? And some other people I've already talked to. So yeah, Stephanie's saying seasons 1 to 3 are sort of pre-budget. And that said, season 3 has my favorite queen, Raja. You know who I'm looking forward? I just found the season that has Alyssa Edwards. And because, so Alyssa asked, I don't even know if Alyssa won for sure or not, because I haven't finished the season. I was going to say the Staffel, because I think that's the German word, but Alyssa Edwards, I'd actually started to watch the documentary about her dance school in, I can't remember where it is, and she was obviously like, oh man, confidence, she's amazing. But I wanted to see the series that she was in, so I have gone back now. I watched 5 or 6 to 10, and now I'm working my way back. So yeah. that was closer. Yes. See, now if you guys watch RuPaul, you'll get those jokes, so go watch it, go watch it. It's hard to imagine I was 14 when the first season of RuPaul's Drag Race premiered, says La Heretic. Back then I assumed it was about literal drag races. I know, a decade. And that also makes me feel really good too, to see that it wasn't just a flash in the pan. And obviously it's got a huge dedicated fan base in, the queens and the people who enjoy that culture, but I'm hoping that increasingly it's more and more mainstream as people become exposed to it and they start to understand it better. So, let's see. What is The Heretic? These days, some of the contestants got into drag through the show. Oh, right. And yes. So, that was going to be it on RuPaul's Drag Race. And it's got some great sassy songs in it as well. I think I was saying on Twitter just the other day, there's a great line in Sissy That Walk, where it's the opening one, something that turned the world on its head. Don't forget what my mama said. People talking since the beginning of time. If they ain't paying your bills, pay them bitches no mind. Are you paying my bills? And I'm paying you no mind. I love that. And it's a good way to operate, especially on Twitter. All right. So yeah, go get your sass on too. This is the other thing. I'm definitely kind of being a bit inspired to be a bit diva-ish at points because of watching RuPaul. So you can tell I've been watching it because I definitely get a bit more sassy. All right. So that was fun to talk about. That was it. I just wanted something not quite so heavy, given, oh my gosh, we've had a lot of heavy stuff. All right, so I am so poor at managing my time. We have less than an hour now. We've got way more to get through than we actually have time for. So I think it does affect my language. Yeah, probably, I'd imagine. We were talking about doing a PragerU video, and I also had ideally wanted to show you guys some crypt music because there was also a request for doing a bit more hip-hop. So I'm going to tell you what, Crypt is a YouTuber who doesn't copyright strike your content. So we can watch part of his video or some of his video. It's going to be 9 minutes long, which seems like a lot, and I'm a little bit hesitant to do all 9 minutes. So I'm going to give you a little sample. I want to get to the PragerU. That's kind of what I really promised in this episode, and we're in hour 2 and I said I would do it. But if you are interested in finding a bunch of newer YouTubers to follow in terms of rap, Crypt, his channel is pretty big. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of subscribers he has, but he put together this compilation video that had music from a lot of up-and-coming smaller channels, and it is a tradition in hip-hop. You definitely see, like if you look at the story of it going back and what happens when people become successful, a real reaching down and helping others up. It's about not pulling the ladder up, but helping to pull people up when you're a success, doing what you can. And 394,000 subs, says some random geek. So we're going to watch part of it. Like I said, 9 minutes, I won't do it justice, but I'll do the first couple ones, and then you can go and check out the others. So first, get this. I don't think... Yeah, 360 is fine. How are my rap skills going? Well, in private, they're going fine. I'm still doing hip hop as I'm commuting in and out of work. So if you wanted to see that, you can see me. All right. So let's check this out. Now the beat for the song it was created by the first guy on the track. And if you go back a little bit, you'll see that there's a reaction video where Crypt reacts to this video where he talks about the backstory, and that's a 40-minute video. So I want to just give you guys a bit of a taste. You can go check out the rest of the song, and Crypt's video describing it and all of the artists. Maybe I'll wait till we get to Blindside, because that's also a really cool artist. All right, let's just start. Here we go. Check my sound here.
Oh, who made this beat? Nada. Okay, let's trace it back just a couple years. Nah, wait a minute, better yet like 9. When I put my first music vid online, when you had to type in youtube.com. Remember? Man, I never got support, but I chose to keep going. It was something that I owe to myself, cause I never tap out. Man, I never give up. Man, it's something that I don't do. Look, revenge is sweet, and that's why I'm yelling out more sugar. People talk, I just sip my tea, and then I go for the head like Thor shoulda. Man, I'm not around for patheticness. Getting this recognition isn't effortless. Connecticut rapping it, I got it down to a science. You got an F in it. What? Man, Lord of mercy, till God calls me, I'm staying litty. Why's the devil trying to talk to me? Get that hot-headed low life, see I'm busy. Get away. But I'm not really concerned, I just want to sit back, write bars and get kudos. It ain't a stretch if I get the bucks, but it's hard to say, right? Like I'm Tate and Kupo. Used to date a basic chick, but I needed a chick a little bougier. Got a little bit of fame and got douchier. YouTube reactor, but nuclear. Yeah, I wrote a song called Gucci, but I'm never gonna go and cop Gucci merch. I stay humble, I stay lucky, that's always. You heard it first, now.
All right, so yeah, Joey Nada, he's really a music producer more full-time, although he does hip-hop. His main emphasis is music producing. He's got a channel. I do subscribe to it. And he will listen to songs and break down the music production. Like, he'll also react to the lyrics, but he is mostly interested in saying, oh, this is how they created this sound, and this is the instrumentation or the effect they used to create this particular sound. He really knows his stuff, and this is his beat. This is his music. He gave it up for the song, and that's why Crip put him first on the track, and here you can see him playing the piano. So again, I learned all this stuff from Crip's video, so you can check that out.
I know it's hard to believe, I exude art to the T. I am the mark of the beast, I am the monster in comics. It comes out the dark when you sleep, so careful which options you've chose. Deceit is the commonest road. This is what popular folk think they got it on lock, and they don't, because everything they live is lies and it shows. Me, I'm just trying to get perp, move a couple units on the network. YouTube partnered on the low dough, got Susan, how you trying to get hers, let's go. This is the moment I seen, give me a moment of peace. Close both my eyes when I went to bed last night and grabbed my dreams right the fuck out of my sleep. Now I'm here, I'm back.
All right, so couple things. That guy was mostly a reactor guy. He's got a YouTube channel and he does reactions, but he also does a little bit of hip hop, and he's a pretty small channel. When Crip saw him, he said he had some very interesting, like, he really liked his voice, so he decided to invite him on to be part of the cipher. Now, one of the things too that you can look for or listen for in this song is, you know, the beat stays the same throughout. It's the same music, but how the various artists choose to go slow or fast, how they do their rhymes, where they maybe choose to do, you know, quite a lot of spitting versus where they take it more in a more rhythmic way. So yeah, we're gonna go now to Hi-Rez the rapper, who's got, look at this guy's mic. Holy crap, look at that. It's like I mean, I love that idea. Like, now I'm looking at mine going, oh yeah, if I just put a big old foamy thing here, I would not get all the bounce. Like, why try to make your room perfect when you can just make your microphone perfect? Light bulb goes on, but you can tell who's a professional and who's still finding their way. All right, here we go with Hi-Rez the rappers section.
Back with a pen and a pad. It's been a minute since I killed the beat and been in the lab, trying to finish these critics before they calling me bad. Better listen to one spitting before I get mad. Got a goon with a pass, got a tool in a mask. I'll put a fool in the trash. I play it cool and relax. Got a crew in a famine. I know they catch a case for me, but I hustle and struggle, and that's my day-to-day story. Nothing changed but the change. Mama always praying for me. So much pain in my brain, and the reaper trying to call me so much rain for the fame I ain't never really wanted. I ain't never really wanted, but fuck it, I got my mama and wifey to keep me level-headed. Trying to seize the fucking moment like an epileptic. When I die through my lyrics, I'll be resurrected. When I die through my lyrics, I'll be resurrected.
All right, so yeah, he's got a real rat-a-tat-tat approach to his rap. I'm not gonna comment too much on the lyrics because I want to kind of keep it going, and I'm waiting to get to the one I'm waiting for. But let's hit this guy. I'll try to remember what Crip said about him while he's doing his bit. So his Hot 16 or 32. There was kind of a little bit confusion on how many bars people were supposed to send in, but.
Look, I'm in my element,
oh, yeah.
Rap veteran. On my opposition, I beheaded them. I'm ready for whatever, man. When it come to words, I'm a specialist. Every verse I write, pure elegance. I murder a beat and burn up the evidence. Mediocrity, I never settle with. I gotta give them something that was evident. Nowadays, skill is irrelevant. I'd rather be true to myself than synthetic with relevance. How many of y'all can relate? Huh? The industry is really full of fakes. Yo. You gotta say you're starting to catch a break. Huh? And everybody really sound the same. For real. All of you rappers just copy and paste, and the only difference is the name. And even then, y'all put the little in front of it. You need to grow up for a change. Look, rap full of mimicry. Everybody lacking identity and lack the ability. All of y'all lack the affinity to rap, so all of y'all acting as mini-me's. Y'all even matching physically, lacking in dignity. I see it vividly, you need validity. I see the person you really be. Stop with the copy and be the person that you meant to be. Look, elevating at somebody else, you never make it. While you hesitating, get the meditating, no debating, cause you have a purpose. You just gotta learn to activate it, gotta detonate it. Use the energy as motivation, cause you limited by the person you mimicking. I'm telling you, your potential is limitless. I'm not bitter, I'm just militant. I'm trying to empower a new generation of lyricists. Like,
that guy. Love him, absolutely love him. That guy's great. So go check out his stuff. Okay, this one I think might be the last one, but we'll check.
Look, shout out to Crip for putting me on one time.
Nope, it's not him.
Man, I'm tired of all like y'all hating me. I need the dough like it's a bakery. Y'all make it up like it's Maybelline. It's make-believe. You living in a waking dream. I'm feeling lucky, boy. Not all made to be. Get the whiskey out, I gotta take a drink. Then I hop the scotch like I paint the street and start blowing bowls like the Raiders team. Shit is kinda funny, I don't even gotta try. All I gotta do is sit the stew and get a vibe. Labels see potential in the music that I'm making, so they flew me to the bake and try to get the kid a sign. But I can see the vision, they got hit it in the fine. Man, they wanna tell my fans I'm an independent grind, but I'm like, fuck that, I ain't living in a lie. Now they see me going to Atlas like I'm hidden from the eye. I don't really wanna fight you.
Alright, so that guy's got, yeah, I started off slow and kind of left it fast for the end. This guy, as Crip describes, has a heavy metal rock rap voice. So I'm going to back it up just a little bit here so you can get the full effect. But that guy's, I enjoy him too. But this guy's voice, coming up, super, super unique.
That I ain't living in a lie. Now they see me going to Atlas like I'm hidden from the eye. I don't really want to fight you, but I bring the foot down, kick it like I'm Ryu. Bit it to the bone, and it's sweeter than a high truth. Scythe food on the bullshit like it's high noon. Lab invested, yes, map perfected. Past rejected, now crop selected. Loud respected, not a clown objected. Sounds injected in my blood infected. Sick of the politics, open name polish for clout, now this shit ain't for me. Empty the promises into they bottomless ego, no royalties, do it for free. That ain't it, got no brain and no grip. Mud and rain, I don't slip, shout out to Crip. Coming to my mind is sick, try to follow as long, it's too quick, yeah.
Alright, yeah, so not the best, let's say the fastest or the most lyrical way of spitting, but his voice is really unique and fun to listen to. Now this is the last one I wanted to get to. This guy is called Blind Sight because he is mostly blind. I think Crip was saying that he had surgery and now he can sort of see, it's like he describes his vision as looking through a straw that was blurry. And now that he has surgery, it's like looking through a straw that's slightly clearer. But he puts out tons of music all the time and really, so he's just kind of like, he does his own thing, doesn't let his disability stop him from being the artist he wants to be. So we're going to check him out and then we'll head over to PragerU.
YouTube cypher, bitch. I don't need a rhyme, fuck a punchline. Make it feel my energy without ever making a reference to a pink bunny with a drum so dumb. That's a feel about sound like bum 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 bum. Didn't say nothing, but the shit was punk. What the fuck am I on a hump? But the sun to make it jump, jump, jump. Bitch, I'm blindside in the truck of thumping. That's just in the morning, feeling my devotion. Boom, an explosion, rumbling like it's supposed to do. Crushing them all into nothing. These mumbling rappers are ghosting. I'm hoping they grope in the booth. The YouTuber rappers the baddest to cruise. No need to imagine, we back it with proof. When you put me on the track, I go to bat for the views. On the small, so the cats in the booth. Sacrifice the dues for the actual truth. But blow the caution to the wind, throw a bar, hit your chin. I'ma show you regardless and let you know that I ain't playing to win it. I'm taking the game and I'm bringing the pen and I'm gonna make it see to the end of your days. I'm a finisher. Not gonna be waiting for labels to rate me. I'm going independent. I'ma make it see the beast. The rage in me is deep beneath. I keep my can close to feet to sweep away the weak. Compete. Finish 'em. Mine is the sickest. I'm giving it straight up. Surprised when I finish. I'm passing the mic to the next MC. Get 'em. Let's show 'em that YouTuber rap with the best of the best. And no question or guessing the facts. Whoa. The blank I can rap. Putting in work on this track. So I can be the one that you remember when you play the shit back.
Oh, I thought he was done. He's not.
I'm making a name for my life and I'm living it blind and I'm not gonna let you define me. Goodbye.
Alright. So, you guys go watch the rest of it yourselves. This is... so go check the rest of that out. I don't have time for it. You can see there's a ton of great new upcoming YouTube rappers on here. It's kind of a lot of white guys. I don't know if that's just like who put stuff up or like whatever, but there are some diversity there. Just looking through the I don't see any women. So just some critique, just some reflection of, you know, the kind of industry and how it gets dominated by people who, what kind of people end up feeling empowered to make content and what people get lifted up. So I'm not blaming Crip for not putting women on or anything, forcing representation being a thing that he values, just reflecting back that the culture itself is, like the rap scene is highly male dominated. All right. So we said we were going to do a PragerU video on YouTube, remember? And well, I guess people said they wanted it. According to a vote on my my Twitter account. So let's go to the channel. I'm going to have you guys decide what video you want us to look at. So we're just going to... Oh, quiet down there. No. Okay. I wonder if they do the playlist of their own crappy videos. Oh, yeah, they do. I mean, all of their videos are crappy, but this looks entertaining. They have a category called political science. Oh, wait. I don't want to see the video. I want to see the list. View the full playlist. Okay. Oh, I see. So guys, I'll reduce this down a little bit. I can see at 150 it's a little hard for you to get more than one content, but let's see. There's the left ruins everything. Why you can't argue with a leftist. Why Trump won. Why you should be a nationalist. Do you guys have anything? I'm looking at the chat now. So do you guys have any preferences here? I would say those would be my top choices. The left ruins everything. Why you can't argue with the leftist. Why Trump won. Why you should be a nationalist. So you guys have any preferences there? Is Harvard racist? The thing is that I don't know much about Harvard admissions. So, alright, people are saying the left ruins everything. There's a lot of requests for that. And by a lot, I mean one. Someone actually took the time to write it out. And that currently is all the effort it takes to win the contest. The one about, well, we can do more than one. Alright, should we start with, alright. So there's basically a leftist, alright, you can't argue with a leftist or the left ruins everything. Let's start with the left ruins everything. How about that? We'll start at the beginning. Go from there. I have to figure out a better system of deciding which videos to watch. Okay, so let's see what PragerU crap has going on. All right, you guys ready? I think my desktop audio is still set. All right, I'm gonna try to not overreact. You know, I'm gonna try to not anticipate stuff. That's often difficult to do in these reaction videos, but I'm gonna try. So let's hit play, see what happens.
If what I am about to tell you is true, almost everything we most treasure, freedom, beauty, reason, the family, economic well-being, and even goodness, is in jeopardy.
Okay. Oh, wow, that's not setting the bar at all ridiculously high. All right, so we're basically getting a Chicken Little. The sky is falling. Is that the idea here? The first thing he wants to do is to tell you that everything that is positive, like the family, economic well-being, your basic freedom, even what looks beautiful and goodness itself, is going to be under attack. All right, so run around screaming with your head on fire. Right. Where's the one where Prager, oh, someone is asking me in the chat, where's the one where Prager tells women they should have sex even when they don't want to? Oh god, I guess we'll have to maybe we'll just have to do a Prager as a series, where we binge on Prager videos, or maybe have every month we do one. Anyway, if they have nothing to do but lose their goodness, exactly, instead of losing their chains. Alright, so he's basically saying the world is on fire because of the thing he's going to talk about. Let's see what it is.
Who or what poses this threat? The answer is the most powerful ideology of the last 100 years. Capitalism?
When we talk about power of an ideology is a set of interconnected ideas, usually, that express a value system. I think we could actually look that term up. Powerful ideology. I could also ask Alexa. Alexa, define ideology. I can't hear anything she's saying. I might have turned my sound down. I also just managed to keep my my earpiece got stuck in my ear. A system of ideas and ideals, especially one which forms the basis of economic or political theory and policy. All right, I inserted values there because the values part, you know, underpins the structure of that, but yeah, okay. So he's talking about what is the most powerful system of ideas and ideals, values, ideals. That's kind of where I was going with mine. All right, I'm going to say capitalism in terms of economic effect because it's sort of even places that were attempting socialism have been completely overrun by a capitalist economic framework. And in terms of, like, you know, capitalist ideology, that's clearly the most powerful one of the last, at least since the 20th and 21st century. In terms of transforming society. So let's see what they say is the scary one. Capitalism. Leftism. All right, come on, PragerU. I've never heard of leftism as an ideology. Leftism. Am I spelling this wrong? Leftism. It doesn't even show up. First, leftist, post-leftism. He's just said the worst thing in the world. Leftism isn't a word. All right, here we go. Let's try it. Leftism. Did you mean leftist? See, this is it. They're using words that don't even exist. The word leftism. I guess there is one here, but it's the political views or policies of the left. So you're saying everything on the left, anything. And what is left? Left is subjective. Left is left of right. So and the farther right you go, then all of that is leftism. You know, basically your choices are what? Between then fascism and leftism? They're idiots. Okay. Oh, by the way, speaking of breaking down people's nonsense, I strongly, highly recommend you go and check out PZ Meyer's recent video dunking on Jordan Peterson and calling him out on his crappy, non-scientific, pseudo-scientific views. Actually, I'll pull this up here because I know I shared it earlier this morning, along with some Zen. Oh, maybe I didn't. Oh, look at this. Here's a moment of Zen for us. This one, check out the dog on the left because, oh, he is a leftist dog. He keeps wanting to eat the popcorn of the dog on the right, at least from my direction. So clearly that's the problem with leftism. I didn't realize this little thing would be an illustration of Dennis Prager's cogent point that the most serious threat to goodness and beauty and freedom and everything lovely and motherhood is anything on the left. So hold on. Let me find that PZ Myers video. I'm going to shout that out because PZ is a good guy and deserves more views. If my computer wasn't being so slow. All right. Here we go. It's just looking a little bit weird today. Oh yeah, I'm dunking on the NRA, I'm dunking on Trump in my Twitter feed. You know how I do on my Twitter feed. Oh, come on, PC. Oh, here we go. Yeah, Jordan Peterson's Weird Biological Essentialism. That's the name of it, so go check that out. I can actually put a... I can't. I don't want to embed the tweet in the chat, so... Is leftism a falsifiable theory? Asked 250. Good question. Good question. All right. The evil leftism. Leftism being anything on the left, which is not an objective position. It's a subjective one. So, all right. We know this is garbage. All right. We're just explaining why it's garbage. We're just laughing at the garbage together. Let's get on with how evil leftism is.
Not liberalism, leftism. Or, if you prefer, progressivism.
Oh, okay. Except, and see, this is where the dumb comes in. Leftism and progressivism are not the same things. You know, you can be leaning left and not be progressive. You know, you can sort of have sympathies, but progressivism, define progressivism, especially if I can spell it right. It's support or advocacy for the improvement of society by reform. It's based on the idea of progress, which asserts that advancements in science, technology, economic development, and social organizations are vital to the improvement of the human condition. I tend to, now this isn't, I don't know if this is a philosophically valid idea or, you know, established, but for me, being sort of, let's say, open to reform, open to increasing stuff, but not actively wanting to see your society, like not participating in the act of transformation, so is being not progressive. So for me, progressive is actually like the commitment to the reform, not only the commitment to the ideas. And this is just personal for me, right? So I'm not saying as a political scientist this is right. Progressivism to me is the idea of continually transforming society, being open to the idea of those transformations, but not working yourself to them. I think you can be then liberal, but not progressive. You know, I think that holding on to the status quo a little too much is something that distinguishes progressives from non-progressive. But here they're just basically saying any leftism is evil. Any kind of leftism is evil, and now we're going to associate evil leftism with progressivism. So again, and then there's no citations, no dictionary definitions, no, let me just even see what kind of links they have. View to the script sources in the quiz. Oh, this would be hilarious. Has anyone ever gone this deep into PragerU documentation here? So let's see what their amazing sources are. Take the quiz. There's your transcript, okay. The study guide. Where are your sources? You said there would be a place to give money, because a bunch of rich people really need this. Where are your sources, guys? Right, we're not going to listen to this again. Let's see if the transcript has the sources. Scrolling down. No sources there. You know what a source looks like? It's like a hyperlink, or it has a bibliography or something like that. You know, like a name, a title, a date, author. All right, now let's see the study guide. Let's see if the study guide has some sources. They said sources, right? In that link, it definitely says to view the script, sources, quiz, and study guides. So I'm giving them a chance. It's going to be a PDF. Okay, that's not unusual. What does hate speech now mean? How is the left destroying society? Oh my God! What is this propagandist crap? Wow, how are Democrats soulless demons that need to be destroyed at all costs? Wow. And their key terms are jeopardy, value, leftism, which is a word that, as we found out, doesn't actually exist. Racism, only exists as saying to the left, but it's not like an ideology. And utopian. Right, so sources. Still looking for sources. Looking for sources. There's the quiz. Do you think they lied to us? Okay, there's a newspaper article from Time it might even be an opinion piece for all I know. He's the executive director at Young Americans for Liberty. Gonna guess that's an opinion piece. Opinion piece is not really a source per se, except for the opinion of the person. So there's an opinion piece, and there's another one written by Alex Clark. Who is Alex Clark? Does it say at the bottom who Alex Clark is? No. I don't see these newspaper articles supposed to be discussion pieces or just shutting down exhibit. Another instance, another sort of, I'm going to say a cherry-picked case study. All right. Oh, and here, Emily Shamley Wright is president and CEO of the Institute for Humane Studies at George Mason University. And someone else is Sarah Scoury is a senior fellow at Liberty Fund. Oh, that doesn't sound at all right-wing. So I'm going to just go out on a limb here and say that PragerU's lying. They don't have any sources. They have some newspaper articles that have been cherry-picked, written usually it seems by right-wing people in opinion columns, at least a couple of them, rather than as sort of like factual statements or books published by university press houses or other academically related, or authentic publishers of academic works. So I'm just going to go, I don't see any evidence that they provided sources. They're lying. The PragerU, they're lying to you. F you PragerU, right? As Kevin has on his show. So no sources, by the way, if you look underneath and think that that's the source for their stuff, like no dictionary definition of leftism sourced there, no definitions of progressivism or source to progressive thought and analysis. Nope. It's just cherry-picked studies by right-wing authors, mostly from what I can see. Okay, that's exactly Mike saying that's not how citations work. Exactly. These guys are propagandist idiots who are more interested in dehumanizing people than having intellectual debate. And that fundamentally is what is wrong with evangelical Christianity. It's wrong with Trumpism, is that it's not interested in having honest intellectual exchanges. It's interested in imposing its worldview on you by demonizing those who are outside of it. And this is a 21st century challenge we face, at least, you know, for an American perspective. This is the fascism that we have to acknowledge exists, describe it, and then try to work against it, because your neighbors believe this shit. Members of your family believe this shit. Just the way that, you know, Hitler didn't start off with concentration camps. He started off by demonizing people, demonizing the press that spoke truth to power, by trying to use political power to demonize enemies, and use the state in order to advance a personal agenda. And we're seeing all of those symptoms in Trumpism today. All right, back to PragerU and how the left ruins everything by just existing and disagreeing with Dennis Prager.
Leftism destroys everything it touches.
Wow, okay, well, if we talk about progressivism and the transformation of society, because again, if we went back to, let's say what progressivism is, right? And he was saying, he conflates progressivism with leftism, but then he talks about leftism because I think it sounds more scary, because progressivism actually sounds like making progress. And that is something that they don't really like, the idea of progress. So let's think of some, no, I got progressive, but I need progressivism. Sorry. And I can't spell either. Progressivism. There we go. Alright, I don't know what happened to my wiki article here where it was talking about progressive as it, but anyway, let's think about some progressive movements. The civil rights movement was progressive. It wanted to transform society in such a way that it would, here we go, progressivism is the support or advocacy for the improvement of society by reform. So according to Dennis Prager's definition, when the left engaged in civil rights actions, that was the destruction of society. When it tried to, you know, like reform marital rape laws and create no-fault divorce so women couldn't be sexually and physically abused, you know, in their relationships, that was bad. When kids are not shamed or put into conversion camps when they come out as gay, they're not subjected to psychological torture or a society that shames them, that's bad. I'm just trying to, like, you know, I think if he had his way, we'd bring back marital rape. We'd of course make contraception and abortion illegal. There would be a clear hierarchy. We'd bring back segregation. The ending of segregation was progressivism. So, you know, if we go, and that was only in the 1960s. And that was still, you know, like a process that didn't just overnight disappear. There was a whole culture around it. So does that mean PragerU wants to go back to segregation, where the white man basically could rape women, rape his wife, never have any accountability, you know, just do everything he wanted and never be held accountable? Because it seems like that's what we've been trying to create as a society where everyone has opportunity, not just white guys. But according to him, ending segregation is a destruction of core values in American society.
Here are just a few examples. 1. The universities. Perhaps the most obvious example, one that many liberals acknowledge, is the left's near destruction of most universities as places of learning.
That's so not true. Honestly not true. And I'm sure he'll have no data for this. But if you look at a ranking of university quality in the world, let's just say, you know, like in world, how many U.S. universities rank top in the world? Guys, and this is a massively American biased, you know, study, but best universities in the world. This is as according to U.S. News, and we can also look at the Times Higher Education, but they tend to, I think, put a firewall up. Maybe I'm wrong, but let's see. These institutions from the U.S. and more than 60 other countries have been ranked based on 13 indicators that measures their academic research performance and their global reputations. Right. So, number 1, Harvard University in the United States. Number 2, MIT, United States. Number 3, Stanford, United States. Number 4, Berkeley. Prager. Berkeley, number 4. Number 5, Oxford. We got to finally a non-American in the top 10. California Tech Institute of Technology. Cambridge ranks at number 7, then Columbia University in the United States, then Princeton University, and then the University of Washington. Okay, so of the top 10 universities ranked in the world by U.S. News here, and based on 13 indicators measuring academic research performance and global and regional representation, 8 of the top 10, I can't tell what year this was from just looking at this page. Let's see if there's a date on it. But copyright 2019. I don't know when the table came out, but it's at least copyrighted this year. Gee, who are you going to believe? U.S. News and World Report, which continually ranks educational institutions as part of their brand stuff and be accurate in terms of their ranking, because students use this information to select colleges or decide which colleges to apply to or try to get into, or Dennis Prager talking out of his ass on YouTube. Who are you going to believe? So hard. Which one? Oh, how are we going to decide which one's more credible? All right.
In the words of Harvard professor Steven Pinker,
oh my God, this guy. Oh yes, appeal to authority. This is what we really, really need here. A logical fallacy. Do you know logical fallacy? Appeal to authority fallacy? Let's look that up. Sorry, like this is why I needed a lot of time. All right, I need to get this done in 20 minutes. All right, appeal to authority, logical fallacy. Authority. It's a common type of fallacy argument based on unsound logic. When writers or speakers use appeal to authority, they are claiming that something must be true because it is believed by someone who is said to be an authority on the subject. So let's see if they tried an appeal to authority logical fallacy by showing how Steven Pinker can be believed because he's not one of us. He's not even a Christian. He's an atheist, right? So clearly, if he's saying it and he's an atheist, then we should definitely believe him.
an atheist and a liberal. Because of the left, quote, universities are becoming laughingstocks of intolerance.
Right. He doesn't show any data. He just quotes a guy he agrees with and goes, hey, look, he's an atheist and a liberal. He agrees with me. So clearly you should believe him. This again, when you are indoctrinated into a religious framework where authority is the basis of how power is distributed. You know, for instance, men are the natural leaders of the hierarchy, according to Jordan Peterson. Why? Because they have the special male chromosomes that allow them the magic wand, and this gives them special power, even though there's no evidence for that. I don't even remember where I was going with this. Yes, must be believed. All right, anyway, sorry. I'm off on a tangent. I forgot my initial point. So let's get back to this logical fallacy, another logical fallacy. So we had poisoning the well, right? Initially, the left ruins everything. So that's a well poisoning fallacy. Now we've got an appeal to authority fallacy. This is not high-level thinking here, people.
Unquote. At almost every university, and now high schools and even elementary schools, students are taught to shut down, not debate, those who differ with them.
Citation needed. Seriously, citation needed. I see no evidence of that's the case. I hear no courses that are, put, no debating is allowed in this classroom. It's a complete misrepresentation. Of course, they're a bunch of freaking liars. This is what PragerU do. But just pointing out that they make allegations that are about confirming their worldview. They're not falsifying, getting back to Popper, they're not trying to falsify any of this to overcome it based on evidence. They're just saying, oh, look at this university. This confirms my pre-existing beliefs. Hey, PZ Myers. Is PZ in the chat? Hey, PZ. Yes. Good to see you. By the way, I did do a shout out for your Jordan Peterson video earlier if you missed it. So I'm going to tell everyone after my show to go watch yours. Yeah, I don't see any evidence whatsoever that people are being taught in universities not to debate or reason. In fact, at least in terms of the social sciences, understanding how to interpret, read a theory, understand it, and then try to test it out and compare its strengths and weaknesses with other theories that might account for the same phenomenon, which is quite common in social science. There's not usually one answer because life is a big endogenous mess. But this is another unfounded allegation coming from PragerU.
And to rely on feelings rather than reason.
No. Nope. Here is one thing that has happened as a consequence of feminist critique of things like psychology and research methods. qualitative researchers now consider participants' experiences and feelings as valid sources of data. From a quantitative perspective, you almost have to look at people as subjects, right? You have to treat them as part of an experiment, especially if you're doing experiments. But even when you're doing a survey question, the survey instrument is considered a stimulus. So the wording of the question is given a lot of thought, or at least should be, by social scientists. And so, if you give somebody a stimulus and then you measure how they react, you're only measuring what you can observe, which is what experimentation is about. But in the social sciences, we also triangulate our results. So you might combine survey data to look at trends with results of an experimental, with experiment in the lab, a computer lab usually, on the study of something. And then you'd also qualitatively talk to participants about their experiences. And so the idea that participants' emotions and perceptions are valid data that need to be gathered and evaluated just as much as survey data or experimental data, because it gives us insights, is not replacing data with feelings. Another part of this too is acknowledging from a researcher point of view, look, I have my own perspective on this research, and being self-aware that as you are doing your ethnography or you're doing your focus groups, whatever else, that you're a bit self-reflective about your own role as a participant and how that you're co-creating the data with your subjects, with the people that you're talking to, and acknowledging that. Whereas in the natural sciences, there's a lot of sort of disconnect between the researcher and the subject. And that's not a bad thing. He wants to demonize feelings. But feelings can be data. Survey measures that look at how do you feel about the economy. That is valid data. But what he wants to imply here is that using that kind of stuff isn't scientific, because he doesn't understand social science.
2. The arts. Throughout history, the primary purpose of art was to elevate people.
No. I mean, that's one take on a particular period of time. So if you want to say the way that, for instance, like the church dominated art and prevented secular art from really flourishing because it was considered, frivolous or whatever, then in that, their propaganda goal was to elevate their religion. But if you look at cave paintings, we can't infer that that was meant to elevate people. Some pieces of art have celebrated, like arcs, Arc de Triomphe. They've celebrated military victories. It wasn't to elevate people, it was as propaganda. So once again, he's making a false assertion here. We talked about confirmation bias, right? He's presenting his biases here as if they were conclusions, rather than as statements to be tested against the evidence. And if we just unpack his assumptions and turn them into testable statements, a la Popper. I love it when a plan comes together. I love it when concepts in a video come together. You can then turn it around into something that is a testable statement, and you will see how Prager fails. Just by casting your mind around 4 counterfactuals, you can see how he fails.
Through beauty, artistic excellence, and emotional depth.
Whoa. Beauty and excellence and depth. I mean, if you want to talk about like some of the artwork that was all about reminding us how our mortality and that this world is basically nothing and life is suffering. During the Black Death, the images of mortality and death and the death cult almost was really profound, because people would wake up one morning and be dead by the next day. That wasn't art at that time, wasn't meant to be, oh, look how beautiful this is. Oh, I'm so transported. It's to remind me not to value anything because I could die tomorrow. Now, in say like the time of Lord Byron, and when art's becoming all about sublime in the Romantic period, and yeah, earlier too. But this one size fits all, based also, can I just point out, entirely in Western notions of stuff. He's not looking at art or music worldwide. He's just looking at Western culture without actually saying he's limiting it to Western culture. It only represents certain time periods. And yet he treats that as if this is a universal function of art. Lie. All right.
To the left, the primary purpose of art, sculpture, and music is to shock. That's why so much contemporary art is meaningless.
Lots of art in the day was meant to shock. Have you seen Caravaggio? Have you seen a Caravaggio? Oh my goodness, you don't think his art was shocking at the time? Let's just look at a Caravaggio. I love Caravaggio. I don't even know how to spell it though. Agio. Yeah, close enough. I mean, his artwork was incredibly shocking to the system at the time. It was violent, oftentimes. Here we go. Oh, let's see. Yeah, let's just take this one. He's got this amazing way he uses light and shadow to create incredibly intense scenes where your eyes are naturally drawn to the most, the brightest thing here on the panel, because everything in the dark recedes. And look at where he puts his lightest colors on the top of the sword here, and on the white of his arms, drawing your eye right to the bloody neck. I mean, you're telling me that this isn't meant to be shocking? Come on. I think there's also other really shocking images by Caravaggio. I think the famous one is with John the Baptist. Yeah, another one, more death. Oh yeah, this one. This one is especially. I wish I could. Can I make it? Well, maybe I can go to the website and make it bigger. But this was, I thought, the head of John the Baptist being presented, and again, you've got a gruesome image here, a violent imagery, starkly done with immense contrast, so that your eyes automatically are drawn to where the artist wants to take you. And this is not transcendent and sublime, it's violent. So once again, Prager is really presenting a certain type of almost Christianized Western 20th century view of Western society. That's all rainbows and light and beautifulness and goodness, and as if this wasn't the same culture that invented slavery, that in terms of importing the way we have modern slavery through what was established through the African slave trade. Right before that, slavery was a very different structure. He wants all the stuff that's good. He wants to present as if it's always been good, and it's just a pack of lies.
And involves the scatological, meaning urine and feces. Yes, urine and feces, to give one of countless examples.
So now this is like an appeal to emotion here. An appeal to emotion fallacy, I would imagine. Like, you're supposed to be shocked at the use of bodily material as a source of art. So manipulation of the recipient's emotions in order to win an argument, especially in the absence of factual evidence. Yes, let's see if he actually presents evidence or just outrage here when he talks about how bodily fluids have been used in a couple of cases in art.
In 2016, the Guggenheim Museum in New York featured a pure gold working toilet, which visitors were invited to use. The name of the exhibit was America.
Gee, it's as if no one had ever before thought of using a toilet or anything as an art installation, except yep. Wait a minute, that sounds a little bit... Oh, right, yes, this was it. It was Duchamp, 100 years ago. Right. So, do you guys know about Duchamp's urinal, the thing he did for his art? All right, let's take a look at this. Because, yeah. Dennis Prager is shocked, I tell you, at the idea that we would use a toilet in an art gallery. And yet, 100 years ago, in this time of perfected art, before progressivism, before women could vote, before black people had any civil rights whatsoever, they could just be lynched, whatever. The ideal world that Dennis Prager wants us to return to. Oh yes, Fountain is a ready-made sculpture produced by Marcel Duchamp in 1917, a porcelain urinal signed R. Mutt. In April of 1917, an ordinary piece of plumbing chosen by Duchamp was submitted for an exhibition of the Society of Independent Artists, the inaugural exhibit to be opened at the Grand Central Palace it was going to be staged in New York, and the urinal's orientation was altered from its usual positioning. It was not rejected by the committee since all works would be accepted, but the work was never placed in the show area, yada yada yada. It's regarded by art historians and theorists as the avant-garde of the avant-garde, as a major landmark in 20th century art. I can't talk anymore. 16 replicas were commissioned from Duchamp in 1950s and 1960s. So people were seeing this as avant-garde in the early 20th century, such that people started to have it commissioned. But according to Dennis Prager in 2016, like almost 100 years after, doing something less original is more shocking.
So one could literally relieve oneself on America. 3.
Yes, and what is that experience like? What does that force you to go through as an observer? That's not his point. It's just you should be offended at the very idea, and we should shut it down. So to protect your feelings, Dennis Prager, artists should have to, and the people who consume the art willingly, voluntarily, who go to the show to see it, they shouldn't be allowed to do that because you find it offensive. All right.
Literature. The English department at the University of Pennsylvania replaced the portrait of the greatest English language writer who ever lived, William Shakespeare.
Yeah, he lived several hundred years ago, and there have been a lot of writers since. Just pointing out, yes, Shakespeare is great for literature, but nobody writes like Shakespeare anymore. And we study Shakespeare because of his influence, but it's not as if Shakespeare was the only person who's ever written anything.
With a picture of a black lesbian poet.
Who doesn't have a name, apparently? Is he going to even say her name?
Why?
Oh, no, he doesn't even say her name. She doesn't even get a name. She's just her identity. And clearly, because she's black and a woman and a lesbian, her contributions can't be any value compared to a white man. Wow. Racist. Hello, sexist, homophobic, racist Dennis Prager. You are a piece of crap. Wow, you can't even give a woman a name. You can't even say her name. Wow.
Because he was a white European male.
Or maybe because in a literature department they want to feature people who've written more recently, because if we're trapped in dead centuries, we're not moving ahead. And maybe because, everyone knows who Shakespeare is. Maybe we need to highlight some other people. He's kind of had his time. He's had 400 years. Let's see who else has written stuff that's important. Maybe in the last 400 years, some other people have written some stuff we should pay attention to. Oh, no. Don't take down the white guy. Oh, no.
Leftist professors have replaced the pursuit of excellence with the pursuit of diversity.
Remember, Berkeley was in the top 5. So where is any evidence of these leftist professors replacing the pursuit of excellence with diversity? Is he going to produce any data that shows how much more diverse university staffing has become in the last 50 years? Because that's not happening. Is he going to talk about how diverse the student body is? How we would really have a student body that looks like America in terms of the distribution of percentages, with only 65% of the student body being white at most universities? And here's another question. If the diversity they're pursuing is diversity of ideas, are you saying that having more ideas is less excellent? That it's better to have fewer ideas that people don't question? Dennis Prager doesn't like diversity because then he has to justify his assumed power over people. If you just assume white men belong on walls, life is a lot easier. If you actually have to justify why you should still keep somebody who's been dead for 400 years up on a wall when there's newer people who are coming up whose work is very exciting, now suddenly he's got to justify his existence when he's just thought white men rule.
4. Late night television. In America, late night television shows were completely apolitical.
Oh, they don't like it when people make fun of Trump. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, right? Political discourse is fine as long as we're only making fun of Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. But if you start criticizing people on the right, oh no, now how are late night talk shows even influential? I mean, I understand that some people get their news from it, but most people understand when they watch a late night show, they're watching a late night show. The idea that he has to try to shame late night hosts from not talking about things that are political just shows the extent to which they're not able to defend their ideas. And we all know, too, that the right doesn't do comedy well.
The hosts believed their role was to entertain viewers and offer them relief and laughter after a...
Oh, notice this. Old white guy, old white guy, old white woman, old white man. Look at this. This is Dennis Prager's view of America. It's just white people. Back when white people ran everything, back when white men sat on the stage, that's when everything was better. Back when identity politics wasn't talked about because our identity was the politics. We didn't actually have to be conscious of the fact that we were white men. We were just in power, and nobody questioned it, and nobody asked us to justify it. We were just in our white little bubble, and occasionally, we would bring in someone who's an artist or whatever to show tokenism. But really, white men to a white audience, this is PragerU's worldview.
A difficult day. No longer. You cannot watch late night television if you just want to be entertained.
Well, that means you actually have to tolerate maybe a joke that you don't find funny. Oh, poor conservative white America. Oh, occasionally their Trumpian God Emperor gets dinged on a late night talk show before, someone talks about the latest episode of Star Trek Discovery. Oh, you poor things. Oh, you poor conservative white people. How can we protect you more? How can we wrap you in cotton wool so you don't have to hear opinions that you don't like or to have your ideas mocked because they're stupid? Oh, if only universities stopped teaching people to question religion and think for themselves and have ideas. Oh no, if only the late night talk shows just stopped making fun of the president so that we could ignore it.
Late night TV is now left night TV. Fine.
And again, no data here whatsoever. No data here. He doesn't talk about the Sunday talk shows where people actually get their news. I'm sorry. We're gonna pause this, right? This is the point I want to make. And this is the point. You can tell where the RuPaul's coming in now. All right. So, Media Matters, representation, Sunday talk shows. Let's just have a look at this. Now, okay, it's a little bit dated, 2015. But let's just look at some, because it came up first. Or we can look at this one. I guess my computer's being a little bit slow. If I close some stuff, it'll help. Hopefully I'm not lagging at all. But if you want to look at guests on Sunday talk shows, where people do get their news, they turn into a Sunday political talk show for news. Not like your late night stuff, where it's meant to be light entertainment. So where are they getting that information? What are they getting in there in terms of that now? Gender, ethnicity on the Sunday shows. So in the census, what's this? Men were between 2/3 and 3/4 of all guests on all shows, even though they only represent white men, 31% of the population. So in terms of white men, they were 60%, just white men were 60% of the guests on ABC's this week, and everybody else was 41%. For Face the Nation, 63% of the panelists, white men, everybody else, 37%. Similar distribution for Fox Sunday. Meet the Press is actually one of the better ones. They had only, in comparison, 53% of white men, which is only 20% more than their representation. The population, 47%, everybody else, and 56% to 44% in State of the Union. Now, did they have politics? This guests on the shows? It's hard for me to see this. Let me see if I can blow this up a little bit. Oh, here we go. White people on were more than at least over anywhere, let's say call it 50. I don't have numbers here, that data chart, but white men in terms of census this week, Face the Nation, I don't know what census is. And then it was mostly white men. Next popular category, white women, then African American men, then African American women, and anyone else down. So he didn't talk about the Sunday shows. He talked about the late night shows. Why don't you talk about the Sunday shows there, Dennis Prager? Oh, wait, that doesn't fit your narrative. That's right.
The left has ruined much of mainstream Protestantism and Catholicism and non-Orthodox Judaism, which are now little more than left-wing organizations with religious symbols.
I guess adding women having human dignity to participate would be an example of that. You know, just adding women's personhood ruins religions. This guy is awful. It's terrible. And you're telling me that the Catholic Church and it's hiding its pedophilia? Now that's a right-wing thing. That's what right-wingers do. Progressives, we tend to call that stuff out to the point where, you know, people say we're too hard on our own people. So no, the left has not ruined the religion.
Many churches and synagogues, one is more likely to hear the clergy talk about political issues than about any other subject including even the Bible.
Wow, again, citations needed. I'd like to see an estimate of sermons that have classified political content in them that's to the left. You know, tell me that, like, Franklin, or Billy Graham's son, is it Franklin Graham? Pat Robertson, all those Liberty University types, evangelicals, all that's left now? Catholic Church is pro-choice, pro-gay marriage, are going to do marriage ceremonies? No. It's just fascinating to me how they can lie like this. How PragerU and Dennis Prager just literally, they're lying to your face. And they expect you to believe them. Why? Because he's a white man with a penis. And you have to believe his white male magic stick. Because that's what he expects. That's what he was indoctrinated into himself. And he's trying to continue that indoctrination.
6. Free speech. If there was anything virtually every American considered a bedrock value, it was freedom of speech. Yet the left is destroying even this unique American achievement.
Can I also just say, free speech exists outside of the United States. And one thing that is really cringy, super, super cringy, is when I hear Americans, they tend to be Republicans or right-wingers, if I'm honest, who say, in no other country in the world could you have this sort of judicial check on the executive. Bullshit. In no other country in the world would you have... No. Like, America keeps presenting, it's the only... Pretending. Some Americans keep pretending they're the only people with rights. And there are a lot of places that do it better than America in terms of protecting people's rights. So just going to point that out. If you see someone say that, you know, like, if someone in your family says America is the only country in the world where... ... and it's a basic thing that a lot of Western countries have, just like, really? Because I can think some other countries that have that same thing too. You know. Anyway.
Almost half of America's young people say they believe in free speech, but not for hate speech. Yet
wow, imagine that. The idea that calling for murder or harming people in your society is a disruption to domestic tranquility. Yeah, imagine if you went around saying kill whatever group it is, and you considered that, you know, a joke and an expression of hate speech. And the kinds of society that that would produce, where people could basically just joke about killing entire groups of people, and you think that that's a society where that group of people can get ahead? Stupid and racist and sexist, so.
The whole point of free speech is that it allows people to express any political or social position, including what any one of us considers hate speech.
Oh, wait. So isn't all the stuff that the left is doing you consider kind of a hate speech that you want to stop? But now you're saying that when the left wants to not have a society where it's tolerated to call for harming people or hurting people or using slurs against people aggressively, that's bad. But doing the things, you know, that they want to talk about in other places is good. It's just this double standard. Again, he's holding the left and their hate speech restrictions as being bad, but somehow all the restrictions he wants to place in universities and late night talk shows and in religion, that's good.
And hate speech now means any position the left differs with.
Again, and so this is a straw man logical fallacy. Are we up to, so poisoning the well, the appeal to authority, this is at least the third or fourth logical fallacy that we've had so far. No one I can think of that he could cite honestly or reasonably thinks or has ever said that hate speech is any position which the left, undefined, differs undefined with. He's a lying sack of crap. Dennis Prager is a lying sack of crap. Don't listen to him. That's just a little Dennis Prager is a piece of crap song I just made up for you.
7. Race. America has become the least racist multiracial society in world history.
What? 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 Did he just say that? Did he just say that we're... How? Based on what metric? What are you talking about? Least racist society? I don't even like... this just doesn't even make sense to me in terms of like the scale for that. I have...
On a daily basis, Americans of every race and ethnicity get along superbly.
Okay. Oh, whoa. People getting along is not evidence that racism doesn't exist in a society. What individuals do on an individual level is not saying, oh, well, if these two people get along, then we can't live in a racist society. All right, I'm trying to get through this, but he keeps saying stupid stuff.
But the left constantly poisons young minds with angry diatribes about systemic racism, microaggressions, and white privilege.
Yeah, if people just stopped paying attention to the ways in which the white majority in this country, America, benefits from historical institutional structures that favor whites. Well, if people just stop complaining about systematic racism, and if people who are on the receiving end of microaggressions, if people who don't live with white privilege just shut up about the fact that they're suffering, just shut up about the fact that they can't get ahead, then the problem doesn't exist, right? Well, it doesn't exist to white, rich, privileged, racist-ass, misogynist men like Dennis Prager. He literally wants to stick his head in the sand and say it's talking about the problems that are causing the problems. Not the problems are causing the problems and we need to talk about them. Oh my God, I'm getting so frustrated. Why am I watching this? I'm supposed to relax on a Sunday, you guys. I hope I'm not clipping.
8. The Boy Scouts.
I'm sorry. How can I take this seriously when it's all these first world white man problems? Really, like, if your biggest problems in society showing that the left ruins everything is late night talk shows and the Boy Scouts, you need to really get a sense of perspective in life. Wow. All right, so, guys, I need a break. I've been going for a while. I need a comfort break. I need to top up my coffee. I was hoping to just plow through this, but I'm not going to. I'm too uncomfortable. So what we're going to do is we're going to... I used the word literally wrong. Oh, maybe I'm using it ironically in this case. I'm going to take another 5-minute break. I really need one, you guys. And then we'll come back and we'll finish this up. And I think that's going to be almost everything. I'll check my notes to see if there's anything else I said I would talk about. Maybe we'll end on a moment isn't. So, gonna load up the pre-show thingy-bob here. And give me 5 minutes. We'll be right back for part 3. I'm going more than 2 hours, so just be grateful. Okay, I'm going to text my dad and tell him I'm going to be late on my phone call. So we're going to transition, and I will see you guys back here at, we'll call it 16 minutes after the hour. Bye.
Sunshine. tell me why to alter the truth, and I spent 3 days playing with you, and you disappear in front of my eyes. So that's why I remember I'm alive. You tell me why to alter the truth, and I spent 3 days playing with you, and you disappear. Thousands of people and friends, regardless directions ahead. It's only been lonely, I feel so lonely. I decide to rain, the grains on my head is sad to fade away. To hear you quiet slowly distracts my head. It's a girl in the middle of the nothingness, and you tell me why to alter the truth, and I spent 3 days playing with you, and you disappear in front of my eyes. So that's why I remember I'm alive, and I really miss the sunshine, my look, and I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah, and I really miss the sunshine, my love, and I really miss the sunshine, baby. Oh yeah. Thousands of people and friends, regardless directions ahead. It's only been lonely, I feel so lonely. I decide to rain, the grains on my head is sad to fade away. To hear you quiet slowly distracts my head. It's a girl in the middle of the nothingness.
Yep, I'm back. Me transitioning over to this screen again. Hello, everyone. I'm a little bit early. Sorry, I'm a minute early, but you're just going to have to deal. Okay, so where were we? We were at the ridiculousness that is PragerU. So continuing on, we've got about 2 minutes left, about a little bit less. Let's see if I can get through it without busting out laughing. All right, let's see how the left has ruined Boy Scouts by, I don't know, getting them to not be homophobic and problematizing child sexual abuse that's happened in the past occasionally.
The left is destroying the Boy Scouts. They're not even the Boy Scouts anymore. They're just the Scouts. The left forced them to admit girls.
The left forced them to admit girls. Let's see. Boy Scouts. Because, you know, I don't know of anyone that's forcing the Girl Scouts to accept girls. I thought it was because they were running out of people. Yeah. Boy Scouts of America. Let's see. That's the left forced. All right. Did the left force them to do it? Did the left, whoever this mysterious left is, this nameless, faceless group that's clearly just out to destroy everything that's good and beautiful and honest and everything else? Oh no! Alright, so the Boy Scouts of America announced plans on Wednesday to broadly accept girls marking... Oh, sorry, gotta take off my muted sign. marking a historic, I prefer anhistoric. Just for the record, I prefer anhistoric to ahistoric because it's easier to say anhistoric. Shift for the century-old organization and setting off a debate about where girls better learn how to be leaders. The Boy Scouts, which has seen dwindling membership numbers in recent decades, so it's a market approach, said that its programs could nurture girls as well as boys, and that the switch would make life easier for busy parents who might prefer to shuttle children to a single organization regardless of gender. Look at this, it's pro-family, and it's about understanding that leadership skills are not exclusively the purview of men. I've seen nothing that develops leadership skills and discipline like this organization, said Randolph Stevenson, the group's national board chairman. It's time to make these outstanding leadership development programs available to girls. Oh, look at the evil left running the Boy Scouts. Again, it's just lies. PragerU lies to you. They should be called Lies to You, not PragerU.
Here's the thing about the left. It only destroys. It doesn't build.
Right. The civil rights movement didn't build civil rights. Feminism hasn't provided us an environment where women feel more empowered to develop leadership skills and make contributions. We don't see progress in terms of how men view women less as sexual objects and more as fully rounded human beings because of progressivism. No. Oh, wait. Yes, we do.
The Boy Scouts have helped shape tens of millions of boys.
It's really important that those leadership skills and powers only go to boys. You know why? Because he wants men to run things and for women to serve the men who run things. That's the PragerU power structure. Penis über alles.
Into independent, strong, good men. So where's the left-wing version of the Boy Scouts? It doesn't exist.
Right. Because only the right wing can give men toxic masculinity. The left gives men a fully rounded approach to human emotions, and that anger and violence isn't a solution to your problems. But that doesn't exist in the left wing.
There is none.
Again, assertion, no evidence. Just notice when we talk about that whole thing about confirmation bias. If you look, I'm so glad we did Popper, you guys, at the beginning of this show, because Popper illustrates how, like with Adler or Marx or Freud, if you are not rigorous in your thinking, everything you see becomes a confirmation of your theory. And this is a symptom. This is the sort of pathological problem of PragerU, is that it finds confirmation everywhere. And it never takes a risky prediction the way that Einstein did, or the natural sciences did, or social sciences do now.
9. Male, female. In some ways, scariest of all, the left is committed to ending male and female as distinct categories.
It's really important for him that male and female are somehow socially enforced, not questioned, especially because the way they have been constituted historically has been to provide men with unjustified power over women. That's pretty much, if you look at religion, if you look at politics, if you look at economics, masculinity, power, authority, autonomy, all of that is bound up together. And then you only have to compete with other men, and not even just other men. For a guy like Dennis Prager, you only have to compete with the white men who are in your, peer group, because non-white men are marginalized in some way in American society, right? You've got your white privilege. So by narrowing this pool, of potential leaders to white men like Prager, this is very safe for him. It gives him an ability to assume he deserves to rule by nature of his being a man, and that women are designed to be subservient by nature of being female. And so anything that actually requires a justification of the exercise of power not rooted in biology terrifies him. Because we just think about a little bit, why should men rule the world? Why? Because they can beat up women. They're physically bigger, right? Men are physically bigger. And what's the natural progression of that? That they can beat their opponents, that they can beat women down, as opposed to engaging with them on the merits of their ideas, and maybe even letting women, when they have better ideas, acknowledge that. So If you don't have clear categories of male and female, then Dennis Prager doesn't know where power comes from. And he finds that terrifying, because the idea of constructing power on an egalitarian basis disempowers him.
Children are increasingly raised not to think of themselves as a boy or a girl. Teachers are told not to refer to their students as boys or girls.
Again, citations. I actually think it's good that we have toys that don't have gender designations so that kids are filtered into what kind of toys they want. I don't see any evidence that pronouns aren't being used. This is, again, just freaking lies. Lie, 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 lie. And we looked at the sources, did we not? Did we not? We looked for sources. We went on the links. We looked for the sources. There were no sources. PragerU lies.
Just students. In New York City,
yes.
Parents do not have to check off male or female on their newborn's birth certificate.
We must force people. If we don't force people to check off a sex, this is going to be the destruction of everything good and beautiful about America. Why? Because you're threatened by this, Dennis Prager. Nobody cares about your feelings. The fact that people aren't forced to choose and impose a sex on their child, it doesn't really matter. It's nothing to do with you, mate. Shut your mouth. Shut your racist, homophobic, misogynist, Christian reactionary, Trump-loving, ass-kissing mouth. Nobody's interested.
They can check off X.
Yeah.
All this imposed gender confusion.
Wait. Is it imposed gender confusion, or is it providing people with more options in life to more accurately represent the variation that is sex and gender based on observation? Oh, wait. That's right. If we don't narrowly confine everything to a hierarchy of penis power, Dennis Prager gets terrified.
Can only end up producing confused people and a confused society.
He's confusing his own idiocy with everybody else's ability to understand stuff. So this is another problem. Just because he doesn't understand it doesn't mean it's not understandable. He's just not thinking or being critical in his analysis. He's not being open to evidence. He's not looking honestly at his own worldview. Ergo, he imposes these values of being coherent and everything else on it just because of his fifis. He has demonstrated none of these claims. He has demonstrated nothing in this video. He has made a bunch of feels assertions, and he's used logical fallacies, he's used propaganda, and he's used name-calling and weasel words, but he's not actually presented anything convincing in terms of empirical evidence.
So why does the left engage in so much destruction? Because it thinks America is essentially a bad country.
All right, why do we break down systems of oppression? Because it makes society better for people who have been historically oppressed. You can't have equality of opportunity or outcome if you are living in a society that's bigoted against you. So the things that are being destroyed, like Jim Crow, even though it's coming back under the current Republicans, things that were destroyed, like the notion that a wife owed her husband sex whenever he wanted, and she didn't have to consent. Destroying those old, outmoded, outdated, unnecessary, harmful ideas is called progress. For Dennis Prager, it's a threat because it means that he doesn't know where he belongs in society anymore. He has to sort of find his way, as opposed to saying, well, I'm a man, so clearly I run the household. I'm white, so clearly I can get the best jobs. I'm a Christian, so everything in American life should revolve around Christmas and Easter and everything that is important to me. And anything that threatens that is a threat, he thinks, to him because he doesn't know how to be tolerant. He doesn't know how to tolerate other people. He can only feel attacked when bad parts of his worldview are pointed out, as opposed to being self-reflective and go, yeah, maybe that's not the best thing to do for society.
But America is only bad compared to utopia. And the left is utopian.
No, America's reality is only bad by the standards we set ourselves for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How can you have a pursuit of happiness when you are being discriminated against? When you are forced to wear skirts in school, so the boys in your classroom look at your legs, and then society tells you not to show your legs off, you little slut. Don't wear those leggings because men can see your butt, and they can think of the boys when you go shopping. If you followed my Twitter, you know that there was a story about a woman who wrote to the freshman class at some university, the women, saying, I noticed that when I came on campus, I think it was Notre Dame, He's saying, oh, you know, as a Catholic mom, I don't want to tell women what to wear, but I noticed my son really struggled not looking at women's bodies on campus because you're wearing leggings. So female students of Harvard or wherever, Notre Dame, please think of the moms of the sons of your classroom when you go shopping and buy jeans instead. So on the one hand, you had the mom saying, don't wear leggings. Leggings cover your legs, right? Because they're too form-fitting. We need to protect my son from his own thoughts. So please do my job for me. I don't want to actually have to train my son or teach him to deal with his sexual thoughts and how to control those and like go about your day. That they're perfectly natural, but here's some signs of obsession you might need to think about something else, right? Instead of doing that work, we just need women to baby-proof the world so that men don't have sexual thoughts, which they inevitably will have anyway. So on the one hand, you had this. And then on the other hand, a North Carolina judge had to strike down a school rule that required girls to wear skirts. And the judges pointed out there's no educational benefit to forcing girls to wear skirts. They have to watch how they sit. They're uncomfortable in terms of like the clothing. When it's colder out, their legs are cold. And of course, their legs are showing. So wait, are we supposed to force women to wear skirts to show off their legs and confine them in this gender-appropriate clothing form? Or should we shame women for showing off their legs and body and making boys think about sex by just existing in the public world? And this is the problem. Yeah. Sorry, I saw oh my, that's unusual. Yeah, when you talk about the way Americans pronounce thought as thought, and it's so funny. Yeah, even when I'm getting brained, you'll never catch me with a thought lacking with it. He ain't spitting like this on his last shit. All right, anyway. Yeah, and so the utopia that the left has is really just the principles and values of the American system. The right to life, to live your life the way you want, liberty, and the freedom, you know, like to have a life that's, you know, like people aren't going to kill you for being gay or for being black or for being Muslim. A right to liberty, the ability to live your life fully like any other citizen, and the ability to pursue happiness. And the left is actually about expanding the scope of who can participate and what it means to participate in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So, all right, but let's listen to the old white man whine, conservative, say, reactionary white dude whine a bit more.
I'm Dennis Prager.
Oh, you're a piece of crap.
Thank you for watching this video.
Oh, downvote. Definitely going to downvote this. Wow, that's awful. That was terrible. That was nothing but right-wing religious almost levels of nonsense, if I'm honest. All right, guys, so we have gone over time. I didn't get to, I know I had notes somewhere. I think there's a couple things I forgot. Oh, all right. I'm worried. I do want to mention this because it is important. I tried to do it on the happy hour, ran out of time. So I want to present it here. And this is to bring to your attention the most recent a recent blog about studies into brain functions. Now, I'm going to be honest. As someone who studied sex and gender and political attitudes, I've seen multiple attempts of people trying to link, you know, chromosomes and twin studies to political attitudes and behaviors, brain activity to various things. And I understand that there's the nice thing about doing a sociobiological study, as it were, is you can get some pretty precise measurements. But when we talk about essentialism, I tend to hold biological results in a sort of like, okay, how should I say this? The structures of your brain will influence or could you know, modify, or that's the word I mean, interact with your perceptions of reality, and how your brain processes that information will have an effect. I don't think it's deterministic, though. You say what I'm saying. I don't think your brain determines how you think, because our brains have what's called plasticity. It's the ability to change. But do I think that people are perhaps socialized in ways to use certain parts of their brains more than others? Yeah, that could be, I definitely say that. Or do some people have brain structures through variation that naturally have certain kinds of capacities and talents, and so when they're recognized, they're more developed? Sure. But I really don't like to say, oh, you know, we can find the gene for being gay here, or the brain structure. I think that's a little too reductivist. Nature-nurture is too interactive, I think. But to say the brain structure would have no influence on how we perceive the world or react to it is also naive, I think. So it's treading that line of nature versus nurture. But this is from the March 27th article from the Cleveland Clinic, Research on the Transgender Brain, What You Should Know, Expanding Knowledge of the Brain and Gender Identity. What's going on in your brain plays a large role in determining the gender you identify with, and researchers working with transgender people are just starting to understand how. Being transgender has nothing to do with sexual identity. As one doctor puts it, sexuality is about who you're attracted to, gender is about who you are. Where does gender originate? In the birthing process, a medical professional will declare your baby a boy or girl based on their sex organs, but does this determine their gender? Quote, "We're trying to change the understanding of gender," says psychiatrist Murat. Murat, I'll just say, "That's one of my big goals. The main question I'm asking is, where is the gender?" Unquote. We know from an embryo that genitalia specializes, yada, 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 yada. Okay, so a little bit about brains. The male and female brain have structural differences. Not like you can sex a brain. You can't sex a brain if you look at some of the other studies. Do women have, I think it's a slightly more developed amygdala than men do on average? Yes, where the seat of emotion is. Is that because of socialization or because of biology? I don't know that that's been established yet, but anyway. But knowing that, I will say that I don't doubt the hypothesis that by the time, you're the age you are here, a combination of maybe innate brain structures plus socialization will affect how your brain is structured. If you have a stroke, you can relearn some skills. HK, thank you for the tenor, but you didn't say anything, so you just get a hug. So coming in for the hug, HK. And I think I owe John one from a couple weeks ago too. So that's your 10-pound hug. Thank you, HK, for the support. Right, so when we look at the transgender brain, we see that the brain resembles the gender that the person identifies as. For example, a person who is born with a penis but ends up identifying as a female often actually has some of the structural characteristics of a female brain. I just don't want to oversimplify the female-male brain, okay, just with warning. And the brain similarities aren't only structural. This one is more interesting to me than structures. Functions. The functions of the brain are far more interesting to me than the structures. Quote, "We're also finding some functional similarities between the transgender brain and its identified gender," unquote, says Dr. Altine says. In studies that use MRIs to take images of the brain as people perform tasks, the brain activity of transgender people tends to look like that of the gender they identify with. Now, quote, "This research in this area is extremely limited, and more research needs to be done to find conclusive results," Dr. Altine notes. "But we're already seeing definite trends," unquote. Though these differences in brain structure and function are important markers for gender determination, it isn't always as simple as male or female. Some research shows that the brains of transgender people are somewhere in between, sharing characteristics of both, and again, don't like this phrase, male and female brains, because you can't sex a brain by looking at it. The structures of it, as it were. This is consistent with the growing understanding that gender exists on a spectrum, with people identifying not only as male or female, but also as genderqueer, gender fluid, or non-binary. These terms refer to gender identities that incorporate a variety of gender characteristics. To me, what this says is that the studies are observing what we've seen in other parts of nature. Variation exists. And we should embrace that variation, not deny it and force it into a box where it doesn't fit. So for me, the idea that a combination of brain structures, brain function, socialization, all of this stuff can come together, and we can't always slide people into a dichotomy, that there's more variation. We need more categories. We don't need to force more people into the same box. We need more categories to capture the variation. That is science. That is science. And I wanted to bring this because I know a lot of you on social media will interact with people who deny that gender is anything other than a dichotomy. There's only male and female, there's only man and woman, there's only two genders. Here's the latest scientific research, and this isn't some sort of left-wing, pink news or salon. This is the Cleveland Clinic. This is the Cleveland Clinic. So this is science, not progressivism, as it were. It has an implication for how we understand the world, but this is not some sort of left-wing conspiracy. It's just going by the data. All right, I have a bunch of stuff in my thing here, but I won't have time for all of it. I think the only moment of Zen was we already looked at. I think I found these two sweet little pups. And I need to get going. We've gone so long. I meant to call my dad. I told him I'd call him by 1:45, so I've got 8 minutes. Make my weekly calls back to the family. You guys, this has been so much fun, and I hope you enjoyed the show. I am thinking about trying to spin some of this out in terms of, I might take the PragerU bit and make it its own bit. Maybe I'll take the RuPaul bit and make its own bit, because I know that 2 hours or 2.5 hours is a big commitment for some people. But thank you again to HK for your contributions to the show. I do appreciate it. It does help offset like the podcast costs and helps me buy new stuff, new equipment. So thank you very much for your financial support. And next week, I will have to see if we're going to do Weekend Winters on the Saturday or the Sunday. I'm going to be traveling for work on Sunday, so I can be there Monday morning. I will figure out my travel schedule, and then I will schedule the show accordingly. So if it doesn't really work on the Saturday or the Sunday, I might try doing a Weekend Winters where I would do it 6 o'clock on a weeknight rather than doing it at 12 o'clock on a Sunday. But whatever it is, it will come up in the subscription feed. So if you want to stay tuned, subscribe to the channel. Or, yeah, that's probably the best way to do it. You can also follow me on Facebook, but I'm a little bit not so regular with my Facebook updates. So better to follow me here. And until next time, guys, you are, there's some questions in the chat I'm seeing. So I will, before I leave, I will try to answer some of those. Someone said, are you going to debate Sargon of Akkad again? Please, Odom. No one's asked me to. I mean, I'm happy to chew Carl up and spit him out because it's easy. The more I have interacted with him, the less sort of intimidated by his audience size I've become, because all you have to do is just unpack little phrases, the things that Carl says, just unpack the logic of them in real time, and he collapses because he can't think on his feet and he doesn't have a good understanding of his own positions. So I'm happy to debate Carl again anytime. Like, book it. If anyone wants to put it together, I'll say yes. Although I know he's got some other stuff planned with, I don't know if the Molyneux, Sargon, who was it going to be, Destiny, and his ideal guest was Sam Cedar. It was supposed to be April 4th, so I don't know if that was right, if that's still going on. Some random geek says, brain stuff worries me because I fear it could lead to trans people denied the right to identify if their brain doesn't match. Again, I don't think, sorry, that's 250, not some random geek. I must have scrolled down a little too aggressively. I don't think, again, this is, I would not say that you can scan someone's brain. Oh, John Milne is in the chat. Yeah, I think you gave me $2 or £2 the other week, and I didn't give you a hug. So come here, come in, John. Oh, that's nice. Okay. Yeah, I don't. You can't. If a scientist came along, and you handed them a brain, they can't sex it the way that you could say like. Sex the skeleton based on how flared the hip bones are in the pelvis and the size. You know, you can't hand a brain to someone and say, oh, this is definitely the brain of a teenage boy versus, you know, like a young woman. You can't do that. So that's not how brain structures exist, and it's not like you can scan a brain and determine these sorts of things. Structures, functions, and perception, they're all interlinked. Thanks for streaming. It's good to, yeah, it's always good to get it dunk on Dennis Prager. I could do a whole show. I might just do a whole series ripping on Prager University once. People are saying goodbye. Okay, yep. That sounds like... All right, good. A brain, a scientist, and a right-wing propagandist all walk into a bar. Yeah, thank you, La Heretic. Dorian Sapien Amila? Is that how you say that? James Russell, I'm just shouting out people I see in the chat now. Milked Alaska. Giving you guys some shout-outs just to say thank you for stopping by. All right, so I read the chat. Did my bit. I wanted to do interactive stuff, and now we really have to go. So until next time, guys, I have been Chrissy. You've been so super awesome, and goodbye from me. And have a great. I need a new tagline now for Weekend Winters. Have a great rest of your weekend, and have a great Winters week as well. That's pretty cheesy. I'm not going to do that again. Okay, guys. See you later. Bye.